Chapter 77. In the mountains of Wolong Temple, when the sky was getting dark in the evening, it started to drizzle. The cold air of the rainwater hit one's face. Guyu closed the windows and looked at Xin Miao. Young lady, be careful not to catch a cold. Jingzhi draped a cloak over Xin Miao and said worriedly, the mountain road is not easy to walk on. If it rains for an entire night, one do not know if one would be able to continue the journey after the incense sticks. One might have to rest here for another day if one were to walk on the muddy road. Rest for another day, then rest for another day. Guyu smiled. The scenery here is very good and the environment is quiet. It is better than. She swallowed the rest of the words back into her stomach. She thought that it was better than those hypocritical people in the Shin residence. Xin Miao sat in front of the table playing chess. Nowadays she loved to play chess more and more, but unfortunately the few maids around her did not know how to play, thus she was always playing alone. Occasionally Guyu and Jingzhi would also feel strange. When their young lady was playing alone, she would sometimes show a strange expression that made one's heart turn cold. The door was pushed open and Gue Momo walked in with a face full of smiles. She was holding some food in her hands and smiled. Young lady, this is the vegetarian food in the temple. Even though it is vegetarian food, but the vegetarian food in Wolong Temple is not bad. This old servant had specially ordered a bowl of crystal osmanthus flower soup. Eldest young lady and second young lady had already eaten it and said that it is not bad. Oh, place it there. Xin Miao said lightly. It is best for young lady to eat it while it is hot. It would not taste good when it is cold. Gue Momo warmly picked up the bowl and was about to pass it to Xin Miao. Momo, what is the hurry? Jingzhi took the porcelain bowl from Gue Momo's hands without a trace and said with a smile, did not young lady say to place it there? Just now there was some discomfort, so it can be used after a while. Gue Momo's heart was somewhat annoyed, but seeing Xin Miao's noncommittal look towards Jingzhi's words, she secretly gritted her teeth. Previously Xin Miao always took Gue Momo's words as the most important, and if Gue Momo had a dispute with the few maids, she would definitely punish the maids first. One did not know when it started, but Jingzhi, Guyu, and the few maids started to give Xin Miao face. Just as she was pondering, she suddenly heard Xin Miao say, Momo has accompanied me for 14 years. Gue Momo's heart jumped as she looked at Xin Miao. Xin Miao also looked over at the same time. Her pair of clear eyes were as usual, like a child's innocence. Gue Momo was also in a trance. Unknowingly, the infant who was crying piteously for food had grown into a delicate little girl, and then into the slender young lady in front of him. Gue Momo sighed in her heart. At that time Shin Xian and wife fought on the battlefield all year round and instructed her to take good care of Xin Miao, but in a flash 14 years had passed. Ever since Momo was close to me. Xin Miao said softly, remember that there was one night when I had a fever and it was raining outside like now. The residents took the invitation to invite a physician but did not come. Momo was worried and ran out to look for one. In the end, she slipped and fell on the road and broke her head, but still insisted on looking for another physician. Gue Momo was surprised for a moment and her expression could not help but soften. Young lady, still remember these? Of course I remember. Nanny has been with me for more than 10 years. My parents didn't spend as much time as Nanny. I regard Nanny as my family. Miss, you're making this old servant suffer. Gue Momo sighed in her heart. She did not expect that Xin Miao, who had been cold to her all this while, would suddenly be this close today. As she sighed, her heart could not bear it. One was not like this from the beginning. At the beginning when Shin Xian and wife made her Xin Miao's Momo, her son had not married yet and did not have any grandchildren, thus she treated Xin Miao as her own granddaughter. There were times when she treated her with true feelings, but every man for himself and heaven and earth destroy him. Xin Miao was after all not her biological granddaughter, and the first household had promised that if the matter was successful, her son's entire family would benefit. Riches were sought in danger, and moreover Xin Miao really could not bring anything to her. The expression in Gue Momo's eyes changed a few times, but at the end she still smiled. Young lady, the weather is cold and the night is heavy. It is better to have an early meal and rest. When one is tired, light a stick of incense and have a good sleep. It would be good to light the incense tomorrow morning to pray for Furin and Master. Many thanks for Momo's concern. Shin Miao also smiled, but her smile seemed to contain some unknown meaning. She said, Momo can withdraw first. I will have a meal myself. Gue Momo still wanted to stay a little longer, but upon seeing Shin Miao's manner of chasing her away, she could only withdraw in embarrassment. After she left the room, she did not go far but walked to the window and listened carefully to the movements inside. After a moment in the room, Gu Yu's voice sounded, Young lady, the food is getting cold. Set the food. Following that, there was the sound of bowls and chopsticks clanking, as if someone was sitting at the table to eat. Jingzhe asked, Does young lady feel that this osmanthus soup is good? Not bad. Shin Miao's voice sounded, It is very agreeable. Then eat more. Gu Yu said with a smile. After listening for a while, it seemed that Shin Miao had finished eating and there was the sound of the bowls and chopsticks being tidied up as Gu Yu carried the food basket out. One heard Jingzhe said, Does young lady still want to read for a while? Somewhat tired. Read for a moment more. Go and light the incense. Shin Miao's voice was weak. Gue Momo straightened her body and gave a deep sigh of relief before turning her head to look at the window again before walking out of the courtyard. When she was out of the courtyard, she could not help but turn her head back and whisper, Young lady, do not blame this old servant for being ruthless. If eldest Furin wants to deal with you, no one can stop her. After Gue Momo left, one did not see a male figure appearing behind her. He looked at Gue Momo's hurried back view and a look of anger appeared on his face. In the room, Jingzhe looked at Shin Miao worriedly, Young lady, Gu had already gone out. This servant still do not understand what young lady wants to do. One did not know why, but Jingzhe's heart was somewhat uneasy, as if something was going to happen in this quiet deep mountain. She asked, Young lady just put up that play to deceive Gue Momo. Could it be that Gue Momo has some tricks up her sleeves? And Shin Miao's kind words to Gue Momo made Jingzhe very nervous, fearing that Shin Miao would be as obedient to Gue Momo as she was in the past. Shin Miao looked at the flickering lights and the tiny sparks made a crackling sound, forming a sharp contrast with the pitter-patter of rain outside. Pretending to eat and pretending to light the incense were just expedient measures. As for why she said those words to Gue Momo, it was not because she was soft-hearted. No one could turn back on this path of revenge. If it was not due to the kindness in the past, then it would be a reason to commit a mistake in the future. Evil people were never worthy of pity. Those were like the words of the winner to the loser in the inner palace, the words of the winner before the decapitation. She gently closed her eyes. Young lady, what to do now? Seeing that Shin Miao did not answer her, Jingzhe could only change the question. Wait. Wait for what? The young female's eyelashes moved slightly and her lips slightly hooked up. Wait for the moonless and windy night to kill and steal. Chapter 78. The sky gradually darkened. In the temple, the monk who was ringing the bell had finished ringing the bell for the last time. The sky was as dark as ink. The pitter-patter of rain hit the bushes, emitting the fragrance of the earth. Shinyu sat in front of the table and put down the book in her hands. She rubbed her eyes and seemed to feel a little sleepy. The maid beside her asked, Does young lady want to rest? Shinyu did not speak and opened the window. Shin Qing was staying in the room next door. Shin Qing's room was not far from her and at this moment the lights were still on. Does second young lady want to sleep with eldest young lady? The maid asked hesitantly. No. Shinyu turned around with some disgust. Go and close the courtyard doors. On the other side, in Chen Qing's room, Chen Qing was fiddling with the little toy in her hands. She lazily yawned and glanced outside. It's already so late. She stood up. It's better for me to rest. When she passed by the table, she suddenly saw a unique-looking incense burner and a stick of incense. Shenqing picked it up and smelled it. She felt that it was very fragrant and said, "Light this incense too." After a short while, the lights in the room were extinguished. Everything returned to silence. In the deep mountains of the ancient temple, other than the chirping of birds and insects, there was only the clear sound of rain hitting the tiles and dripping down the eaves onto the stone floor. In the deep silence, in the innermost room of the northern pavilion, the lights were quietly extinguished. In the darkness, there seemed to be someone's footsteps lightly passing by, and if someone were to pass by at this moment, one would see a purple-clad young female sitting at the table in front of the window. Her face was cold and expressionless. Only her pair of eyes were clear in the dark, as if it was a huge beast that wanted to hunt and was closely following the arrival of its prey. The tiles above seemed to make a clear sound. Gu Yu and Jing Zhe, who were standing behind Shen Miao, raised their heads at the same time and looked nervously at the person in front of the table. After a moment, a meow sound was heard from outside the window. Both of them breathed a sigh of relief at the same time. But before their sigh fell, they heard a burst of hurried footsteps. Even though the sound was light, it was exceptionally obvious to the three of them who were not sleepy at all. Then, the window was opened and a figure jumped in. "Miss, it is me, Mo Qing." That person said softly. Gu Yu and Jing Zhe then gave a sigh of relief. Jing Zhe lit up a thin candle, fearing that the light would penetrate outside. At first glance, he was very surprised to see that Mo Qing was carrying a person on his back. That person was none other than Shenqing. At this moment, Shenqing's eyes were tightly shut and she appeared to be in a deep sleep. Jing Zhe and Gu Yu were extremely frightened in their hearts, but Shen Miao swept a glance at Shenqing and lightly said, "You have done very well." Mo Qing's expression was somewhat awkward. This was the first time he did such a thing and he did not know what Shen Miao was planning to do. He only thought that it was because of Shen Miao's temper that she was dissatisfied with the room she was staying in, so she used this method to secretly change rooms in the middle of the night. However, this method was a little too crude. If he wasn't careful and was discovered, he would be treated as a rapist. Even if he had a lot of mouths, he wouldn't be able to clear his name. But it was fortunate that there were only 2 guards outside Shenqing's and Shen Yu's room. For a young lady of a military family, this number was too strange. But since that was the case, he would not find trouble for himself. Carrying a young female was an easy matter for him, and before that, he also followed Gu Xiang's instructions to mix something in Shenqing's incense to make her sleep soundly. "Carry her to the bed," Shen Miao said. Chapter 79. Mo Qing did as he was told, and after thinking about it, he pulled the quilt on the bed to cover Shenqing. Even at this time, Mo Qing still could not understand what Shen Miao wanted to do. "Young lady, now we..." Gu Yu asked tentatively. In this room, other than Shen Miao, no one else knew what she wanted to do. Mo Qing thought that Shen Miao was playing in a fit of pique, but Jing Zhe and Gu Yu could vaguely sense that it was not so. Shen Miao was no longer the kind of person who would be angry with others just because the room was not comfortable, not to mention that she carried people out in the middle of the night. If it was just for this small matter, it would be making a big fuss over a minor issue. "Let's go." Shen Miao swept a glance at the person on the bed. "Go?" Gu Yu was surprised. "Where are we going?" "Naturally to my older sister's boudoir." Mo Qing sighed in his heart. It was indeed a child's play. He had some dissatisfaction with Shen Miao in his heart. He did not expect that Shen Miao looked quiet and indifferent, but privately she had such a competitive personality. For a small matter, she did not even want her own Tangjie's innocence. Just as he was thinking about it, his expression suddenly changed and he whispered, "Who?" This time Gu Yu and Jing Zhe suddenly panicked. "Were you seen by others when you came just now?" Shen Miao's face sank. If it was the people from that side, there was no reason for them to be this fast. With Ren Wanyun's all-round character, she would definitely make the other side wait for a longer time. Why would someone come to the door when Mo Qing just sent the person over? If her expression changed a few times. If it was really not possible, then she could only use the lowest method. I will go out to take a look first. Mo Qing nervously pulled out the sword from his waist, but just as he walked to the door, he saw a figure passing by the window. Because he did not dare to make a big move, Mo Qing whispered, "Who is it?" He pulled out his sword and slashed at the other party. But that black-attired person easily avoided Mo Qing's sword, and one did not know what kind of body movement he used. One of his feet stepped on the eaves of the window and flew in like a swallow. He was like a fish in the water in this place. Once he entered the room, he suddenly turned around, and before Mo Qing could react, that person moved sideways and easily snatched the sword from Mo Qing's hand. In the next moment, that sword was placed across Mo Qing's neck. The sudden turn of events stunned everyone. Shen Miao was also somewhat surprised in her heart. With Mo Qing's martial arts, for him to be able to reach the position of commander of the guards, naturally it was not low. In the beginning, he relied on his martial arts to protect Shen Miao in the Qing country safely for many years. Now, he could not even withstand 5 moves from this man in black, and even his sword was taken away. Most likely Mo Qing did not think that the other party would be so much more brilliant than him and seemed to be ashamed, but was more worried about Shen Miao's safety. He said, "This one has no grievances nor enmity with this brother, why would this brother make such a vicious move?" His words were not wrong. Other than the monks, there were also the guards of the Shen residence in the temple tonight. But among the guards of the Shen residence, there was no one with such brilliant skills. Mo Qing's heart was surprised. Could it be that there were other people in this Wulong temple? The other party did not have the intention to let go. A slight sound was heard, and it was Shen Miao who had found a match and relit the candle that was about to be extinguished. The other party did not expect that someone would suddenly light a match and did not even have the time to cover it up. He subconsciously revealed his murderous intent, and it was obvious that he intended to silence the witness for a living. However, when the dim yellow light lit up, everything in the room could not be hidden. Under Shen Miao's cold gaze, a trace of astonishment flashed across the handsome face of the person opposite. He then frowned and coldly said, "Shen family's girl. Can you release my guards?" Shen Miao's voice was colder than the autumn rain outside. Xia little Marquis. Chapter 80. The person standing opposite was none other than Xia Jingxing. Under the dim light of the match, his face was as handsome as a painting, but he was frowning tightly. There was a coldness that was completely different from the daytime, as if he had become another person. Jing Zhe and Guyu had seen Xia Jingxing a few times and naturally knew who this person was. Under the surprise in their hearts, they could not help but stand in front of Shen Miao. It was Mo Qing's first time seeing Xia Jingxing, and he did not know who Xia Jingxing was, but from Shen Miao's words, he knew that both of them knew each other. Xia Jingxing stared at Shen Miao, and after thinking for a moment, he smiled and released his hand before throwing the sword back to Mo Qing in a blink of an eye. He lazily retreated to the door and hugged his shoulders. "Shen family's girl, for us to meet here, should I say that we are fated or fated?" Shen Miao did not bother about him and only instructed Mo Qing and the 2 maids, "Quickly leave." Jing Zhe and Guyu glanced at Xia Jingxing and nodded their heads in agreement. Just as they were about to leave, they saw Shen Miao speaking to them, "All of you leave first, I will follow later." In the darkness of the fire, one could only see that the fire was moving slightly. Guyu called out in a panic, "Young lady, let's go." Shen Miao said. Her command was short and firm, causing Guyu to tremble slightly. Mo Qing shook his head, and with each hand pulling a maid, he jumped out of the window and headed outside. Xia Jingxing was still hugging his shoulders as he watched her actions with interest. Shen Miao fumbled to the table and finally found the incense burner. She picked up the incense on the table and lit it up before leaving the room. Just as she was about to move, she saw Xia Jingxing frowning, and with a flick of his finger, the flame of the match was extinguished. In the darkness, a figure suddenly appeared in front of Shen Miao and lightly held onto Shen Miao's waist. Before Shen Miao could react, she felt that she had fallen into a warm embrace. That person hugged her and rolled on the ground until they rolled off the bed. You! Shen Miao was furious. Xie Jingxing's voice rang in her ears, someone is coming in. Footsteps sounded in the room and Shen Miao's body stiffened. She had never imagined that those people would move so quickly. Fortunately, the person in the room didn't light up the lamp. However, this was also within her expectations. With that person's personality, he definitely wouldn't light up the lamp. Someone outside said, "Your Highness, everything has been arranged. All of you retreat and guard outside. Do not disturb this prince's interest." Another slightly hoarse voice said. Shen Miao's gaze moved slightly. It was indeed Prince Yu of the first rank. Shen Xin a Shen Xin. Prince Yu's voice was filled with pride and there seemed to be some perverted excitement. This prince would like to taste. What is the difference between your daughter and those women's taste? The footsteps approached the bed. Shen Miao's fists gradually tightened. Xie Jingxing slightly lowered his head and because of the position, his chin was on Shen Miao's head and he could smell the fragrance of the young female's hair. He could not see Shen Miao's expression in the darkness but he could feel from her tense body that she was not completely unmoved. There was already the sound of clothes tearing on the bed. Prince Yu's voice was ferocious and the obscenities were endless. Shen Qing seemed to have regained some consciousness and gave out a slight resistance. However, that voice was soft and it did not seem to be a resistance but a greeting. The air was filled with a smell that made one's heart beat. That smell gradually spread out and there was some orchid fragrance that was inhaled into one's stomach without any precaution. Shen Miao also gradually felt that something was wrong and her heart thumped. Just now before she left, she had lit the aphrodisiac incense and now she was reaping what she sowed. She had never encountered such a situation before and could not help but vent her anger on the uninvited guest, Xie Jingxing. If it was not for Xie Jingxing's sudden appearance, she would have left long ago and would not fall into such a predicament. Thinking of this, she glared fiercely at the culprit. Chapter 81. Unfortunately, there was no light and nothing could be seen. Shen Miao hesitated for a moment and did not dare to move as she was afraid of alarming the person on the bed, so she could only use Xie Jingxing's clothes to cover her mouth and nose. She thought that this incense was not a good thing and also thought that she must not inhale it and even thought of using Xie Jingxing's clothes to cover her mouth and nose, but forgot that Xie Jingxing was a male. When Xie Jingxing realized that there was a problem with the incense, he had already inhaled too much and he was still carrying a little girl in his embrace. Now Shen Miao was still wet behind the ears and even though she had a flat figure, she was still a warm and fragrant jade. His body was somewhat tense and at this critical moment, Shen Miao still rubbed against him and buried half of her head in his embrace. Xie Jingxing took a deep breath. Ever since he was born, this was the first time he was in such a sorry state. Looking at the top of his head, that big bed was creaking non-stop and the female and male's voices were intertwined, making one's heart beat faster and one's face blush. That movement made one suspect that the bed would not be able to withstand such movements and collapse. After clenching one's teeth and listening for another half an hour, the movements on the bed gradually became smaller, as if it was tired for a while. Shen Miao's body was also very stiff but at this moment, she felt Xie Jingxing hugging her and rolling on the ground before taking advantage of the window that was not closed to fly out. One did not know how he was able to see so accurately that he did not alert Prince Yu. Not far out, one saw Gu Yu and the other two with an anxious expression. Seeing them coming out, Jingzhe almost jumped up in excitement but was afraid that others outside would hear it, so she said softly, "Young lady, this servant is very worried. Just now someone went in and was not discovered." Her words abruptly stopped because at this moment she saw Shen Miao's posture. Shen Miao was still being carried by Xie Jingxing and as Xie Jingxing was very tall, it was effortless for him to carry her. Jingzhe angrily said, "Quickly put down my young lady." Xie Jingxing raised his eyebrows and let go. With a pa sound, Shen Miao directly fell onto the ground. You! Gu Yu was angry and furious. She did not expect that Xie Jingxing would let go in such a rough manner. She hurriedly helped Shen Miao up and comforted, "Is young lady all right?" Mo Qing stared at Xie Jingxing and his heart was filled with bewilderment. This young master, who seemed to have an extraordinary background, had excellent martial arts. Unexpectedly, he was completely powerless against him. With such skill, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows, but appearing here in the middle of the night was indeed suspicious. Just now when he brought Gu Yu and Jing Zhe out, he saw someone entering Shen Miao's room and behind them was a group of highly skilled guards. If he did not hide quickly, it would be troublesome. Mo Qing could not help but look at Shen Miao again. Could it be that Shen Miao had long known that there would be such a group of people coming tonight? Then what was the meaning of swapping Shen Qing over? Shen Miao stood up and patted the dust off her body before calmly looking at Xie Jingxing. The deeper the dew is, the more one will not disturb the little marquis's work. We will leave first. Her attitude was very distant. At this time the rain had not stopped and as the rain fell on her body, her clothes became wet. With the light from the lantern outside, Xie Jingxing's sharp eyes swept across her face and suddenly smiled as if he was watching a good show. To leave from here, one need to pass through the outer courtyard and there are a large number of guards guarding. If you want to go to your death, this marquis would never stop people from going to their death. Please. His words were really annoying and there was a mischievous smile on his handsome face. Shen Miao looked at Mo Qing and Mo Qing shook his head and blushed with some shame. This subordinate does not have the confidence to do it alone. Even though Prince Yu was incompetent, his subordinates were not to be trifled with. Little Marquis seems to have a card up his sleeve, she said after a moment of silence. Chapter 82. Xie Jingxing's lips curled into a smile as he got up to leave. He actually had the intention of ignoring this group of people. Can you help me? She asked. Xie Jingxing turned around and thought for a moment before nodding his head. It is not impossible, but, if you beg me, I will bring you out. Gu Yu's and Jing Zhe's expression changed. This Xie Jingxing's temperament was so mischievous and his tone was so frivolous. Facing this handsome face, if it was any other female, they would have blushed and their heart would palpitate. If it was not for their eagerness to protect their mistress, one feared that Jing Zhe and Gu Yu would not be able to get angry today. Mo Qing frowned. Shen Miao was Shen Xian's daughter and was usually pampered and spoiled. She looked to have a stubborn temperament and with Xie Jingxing's provocation, one feared that Shen Miao would fly into a rage. But out of Mo Qing's expectation, when Shen Miao heard it, she quickly said, "All right. I beg you, bring us out." Her words were spoken so quickly that Xie Jingxing could not help but choke. He carefully assessed the young lady in front of him. Even though she was begging him, her gaze was completely different, and her posture was calm. She didn't have the slightest intention of lowering herself to him. That feeling was very subtle, as if he was not asking for help, but was instead being ordered by someone high above. Not waiting for Xie Jingxing to speak, Shen Miao immediately said, "Little Marquis wants to go back on his words. You really have the heart of a villain." Xie Jingxing smiled and said softly to the person behind him, "Come out." But in a blink of an eye, a group of black-clad people swept over from all directions. With a rough calculation, there were more than 10 of them which were comparable to the people that Prince Yu brought. Jing Zhe and Gu Yu jumped in shock and Mo Qing was also surprised. His martial arts were not weak but he did not know when did so many people hide here. It was obvious that the other party's skills were above his. However, the young man in front of them was able to mobilize so many experts so easily. It was really hard to guess his identity. Xie Jingxing said, "Be more nimble in your actions. Do not beat the grass and alert the snake." The men in black bowed their heads in acknowledgement and disappeared into the night in the blink of an eye. Their movements were surprisingly consistent, and it was rare to have such temperament among the guards that were raised by Ming Qi. Shen Miao pondered in her heart and heard Xie Jingxing saying, "It will take some time, let's go from the other side." He turned around and walked in the opposite direction, looking very familiar with the layout of the temple. "Follow him," Shen Miao said. One did not know how Xie Jingxing's subordinates arranged, as they did not meet anyone along the way. Even to the southern pavilion where Shen Qing and Shen Yu stayed, there was not a single guard outside. After safely sending them over, Shen Miao said to Mo Qing, "You go back." The guards had their own place to stay. Tonight Mo Qing sneaked out, and if he was discovered, one feared that there would be changes. Gu Yu and Jing Zhe accompanied Shen Miao into the room, but Xie Jingxing did not leave. Jing Zhe stepped forward to stop Xie Jingxing from entering the inner room and looked at him vigilantly. "Gentlemen, please stay." Xie Jingxing really stopped and looked at Shen Miao's back as he said with a smile, "Shen Miao, you have wasted this marquis time for an entire night and you don't even need to explain." Shen Miao's footsteps paused as she sighed in her heart. Xie Jingxing, this person, seemed to be born with a clever and exquisite heart. His hearing and eyes were so sharp that it made others jealous, and many things could be seen clearly with just one look. She was too lazy to hide it from him and looked at Jing Zhe and Gu Yu. "Both of you go to the outer room to sleep first. Little Marquis, please follow me." "Young lady." Gu Yu was somewhat flustered. This is not reasonable, to be in the same room with an unfamiliar male in the night. It would be shocking if it was spread out. If she was caught by others, Shen Miao would really be finished. The matter with Fu Xiu-yi could be said to be a young female's lovesickness. After all, nothing had happened, but this kind of matter would ruin one's reputation, and it would not be clear even if one jumped into the Yellow River. Chapter 83. No one knows what is wrong with it. Shen Miao did not intend to listen to the two maids and looked at Xie Jingxing. "Come in." Xie Jingxing shrugged his shoulders and followed Shen Miao into the inner room. Under the uneasy eyes of the two maids, Shen Miao calmly closed the door. After lighting the oil lamp and closing the windows, Shen Miao sat down in front of the table to isolate the pitter-patter of rain outside. Xie Jingxing leaned against the wall with interest as he watched her pour the tea and asked, "Why are you not afraid of me?" "Why should I be afraid of you?" Shen Miao retorted. An unmarried young lady and an unfamiliar male in the same room. "Not afraid that I will do something to you?" His smile became nastier, but under the light, he looked even more unreasonably handsome. "Just now I have already heard about other people's unmarried affairs with you. Do not little Marquis feel that it is too late to be afraid now?" Shen Miao lightly said. Xie Jingxing was surprised for a moment, and an incredulous look appeared on his handsome face. These years he had experienced a lot of things. He had seen the things that others at his age should have seen, and seen the things that others should not have seen at his age. At least in the Ding capital and even in Mingqi, he was considered to be experienced and knowledgeable. But this was the first time that there was a female that mentioned the words unmarried affairs to him without batting an eyelid. Just now in the darkness he could not see Shen Miao's expression, but now thinking about it, ever since they went out, Shen Miao's voice was very calm and her attitude was very calm, as if the person who heard the unmarried affairs with him was someone else. He almost suspected if this girl was a monster. "Are you a female or not?" Xie Jingxing said as he crossed his arms. A normal female would not be so embarrassed that they would not be able to show their face and no longer mention the matter. But she did not have any reaction previously and even mentioned it afterwards without a shred of shame. Even if she was the daughter of the formidable great general, she was really too special. Shen Miao did not speak. Xie Jingxing nodded his head, almost forgot. "You are naturally not a female. You are just a little girl." Even though Shen Miao was experienced in her actions, her appearance was very cute, especially her white face that had not shed the baby fat. When she did not speak, she looked much younger. Xie Jingxing thought in his heart that it was most likely that she was too young and did not know about the affairs of the boudoir, thus her attitude was so calm. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that it was because of this reason. Xie Jingxing walked over and looked down at Shen Miao. Just now the incense bill has not been settled with you and I almost fell down. He grabbed Shen Miao's face and pinched it twice. What do you want to say? Shen Miao was stunned for a moment as she did not expect that Xie Jingxing would suddenly make such an action, and the other party seemed to feel that it was very fun and pinched 2 more times. It was not a gentle pinch but a ravage that did not have any protective feelings for the fairer sex. It was as if he really treated her as a little girl who was ignorant of the ways of the world. Impudent! Subconsciously, she shouted in a low voice. As soon as the words left his mouth, both of them were stunned. Under the light, the young man's handsome face stiffened. A complicated look flashed across his sharp, black eyes. He retracted his hand, chuckled, and lightly said, "This is the first time someone has told me I'm impudent." Shen Miao was somewhat angry at herself for losing her composure. Xie Jingxing was a person who did things that were somewhat out of common sense. Just now, in a moment of desperation, she actually took out the demeanor of an empress from the inner and outer palaces. This person was very smart and it was best not to be discovered. But she did not know what to say and could only remain silent. Xie Jingxing broke the silence. He sat down on the chair opposite Shen Miao and poured a cup of tea for himself. Suddenly he thought of something and took out a paper bag from his bosom. It was a bag of delicately made pastries. Compared to the Guangfu Zhai in the capital, it looked even better. Chapter 84. Xie Jingxing ate the pastries in big mouthfuls and drank tea before saying, "Came in a hurry and did not eat dinner." "TSK, this tea tastes bad." He had the appearance of a picky gentleman. "Marquis Xie is here to drink tea and eat pastries?" Shen Miao looked at him. "Naturally not." Xie Jingxing suddenly smiled and picked up a pastry and stuffed it into Shen Miao's mouth. His actions were too fast, and when Shen Miao reacted, there was already a sweet taste in her mouth. Xie Jingxing propped up his chin and glanced at her. His posture was leisurely but the words he said were very sharp. "Eat my food and now answer my question." The fragrance of the pastry spread in the mouth and there was a touch of sweetness and moderate fruity taste that lingered in the mouth. Even Shen Miao, who did not like to eat sweet, could not help but feel that it was delicious. "What is the relationship between Prince Yu and you?" Shen Miao looked at him. "You might as well ask me why did I do this tonight. If you are willing to say, I am all ears." Those who humiliate others will be humiliated. A tooth for a tooth, an eye for an eye. The expression in Xie Jingxing's eyes changed a few times and his lips curled up into a smile. His tone was somewhat inexplicable. "You are really ruthless to put your older sister and that old dog Prince Yu together." To say that Prince Yu was an old dog, only Xie Jingxing, this kind of lawless person, would dare to say it. "When they sent me out, they did not think that I am a younger sister." Shen Miao opposed with equal harshness. Her words were cold and she did not hide her disgust and contempt for those people. In the light, there was an indifferent expression and there seemed to be a fire burning in her eyes. Really a girl who does not know the immensity of heaven and earth. Xie Jingxing stretched his waist. "Prince Yu of first rank will not spare you after this." "That would also depend on if he has this ability." Shen Miao was unmoved. "You speak so much to me." Xie Jingxing muttered to himself and his body suddenly leaned forward, almost reaching the tip of Shen Miao's nose. He was so close that even Shen Miao could not help but be slightly surprised. However, she did not wish to be overwhelmed in terms of aura, so she sat still without moving. The young man's face was extremely handsome, and the smile on the corner of his mouth was evil, but his voice was deliberately frivolous. He whispered in her ear, "Aren't you afraid that I'll tell others?" Whatever the little Marquis likes to do, I am also very curious if the residents of the Marquis of Lin had any movements to let the eldest son come to Wulong Temple in the middle of the night to relax. It was not a coincidence that Xie Jingxing appeared here tonight. Moreover, he had brought a group of black-clothed men with extraordinary skills. His identity was even more shocking. There was no such thing as a coincidence in this world. Xie Jingxing did not come to see her. He was probably planning something and the two of them just happened to bump into each other. The young man's eyes were very beautiful. They were a pair of extremely beautiful peach blossom eyes. When he smiled, he could attract people's attention. However, when he was cold, he emitted a cold and dangerous light. For a moment, Shen Miao was overwhelmed by Xie Jingxing's imposing manner. It was not that she had not seen those people with pressure, the imperial family of the Qin country, the imperial family of Ming Qi and even those incomparably arrogant Xiong Nu, but this person in front of her seemed to be more dangerous. You've got guts. He smiled. Likewise. Xie Jingxing stood up and swept a glance at her before lightly saying, "This marquis is not interested in the matters of the old dog. If you dare to reveal a single thing about tonight's matter, Shen family's girl, silencing a witness is not just for saying." When his words landed, he opened the window and flew out, disappearing into the night rain. The cool rainwater floated in through the window and floated onto Shen Miao's cheeks. The coldness climbed up her cheeks and the wind blew her mind awake, making Shen Miao let out a sigh of relief. Chapter 85. Dealing with Xie Jingxing was like walking on a tightrope. This youth was young but unfathomable. Every sentence seemed to be unintentional, but it was a roundabout way of probing. That kind of dangerous feeling made her uneasy. Even though she did not treat the residents of the Marquis of Lineage as the enemy of the Shen family, but the relationship between the two residences was very clear, so naturally Xie Jingxing would not have no ill feelings. Tonight's encounter, Xie Jingxing should be here to do something. He was different from the frivolous little Marquis Xie in the capital. The him in the rainy night was like a different person. Initially she only knew that Xie Jingxing had some ability, but now thinking about it, the secret of the residence of the Marquis of Lineage was not simple. Her gaze landed on the table. Xie Jingxing's unfinished snacks were still on the table. If not for these, everything seemed to be a dream without a trace. But now was not the time to think about these. Xie Jingxing was not that important to her now. Tomorrow. Everything would wait until tomorrow. At the back of the mountain, the pitter-patter of rain drenched the entire mountain and there was a group of people standing under the tree. The youth in the lead was tall and slender. The rain drenched his clothes and also his hair, but he stood like a statue and did not move at all as he looked at the foot of the mountain in a trance. After a moment, somewhere at the foot of the mountain, a small firework suddenly bloomed. Rather than saying it was a firework, it was better to say that it was a small cluster of light and it disappeared very quickly. It was only a moment of effort before it dispersed. The youth turned around and said in a flat tone, "It is done. Young master is injured." The middle-aged man at the side frowned. He lowered his head and looked at the fresh knife wound on his arm. Just now the incense in the room was targeted at males. Once inhaled, one would be led by desire and one would gradually lose one's rationality and fall into madness. The effect on females was not that strong as that girl had escaped a calamity. Even though his rationality was outstanding, he was not a saint and was afraid of an accident, so he could only use this method to stay awake. "Let's go back and talk." "Young master." The middle-aged man was somewhat hesitant and continued to speak. "That young lady of the Shen family had seen today, Tai Yi, it is just a little girl. It is not worthwhile for me to take action." The youth's beautiful peach blossom eyes flashed and his tone was rather cold. The man was somewhat afraid of him, but after thinking about it, he still plucked up his courage and said, "But the Shen family might know." "The Shen family doesn't know." The youth coldly said, "The Shen family are all stupid. It is not easy to have a smart one." He seemed to have thought of something and smiled gently. "It is a pity." The middle-aged man moved his lips but didn't say anything in the end. "Let's go." At the same time, in the North Pavilion. In the room that was adjacent to the innermost room, Ren Wanyun sat in front of the table. She only lit a small oil lamp and the flickering flame was like her heart. Xiang Lan said, "Lady, it's already the third watch, let's rest." Ren Wanyun shook her head and there was a little irritation on her face. "Cannot sleep." She did not know why, but her heart felt uneasy and she did not know where this uneasiness came from. And Gue Momo also said that everything went smoothly. Moreover, when she left the courtyard, she could hear the sounds coming from the innermost room. In the rainy night, she could not hear it clearly, but she could hear the sound of a woman crying and struggling. Although it was not very clear, the mournful and tragic tone was very clear. When Ren Wanyun heard it, her face turned red and her heart palpitated, but she could not help but feel fear and trepidation. There had always been rumors in the capital that Prince Yu of the first rank had many ways to play with females, and now it seemed that it was indeed so. Shen Miao would definitely have to suffer a bout of torture. Even though there was some fear in her heart, there was a sense of comfort in the fear. In the third household of the Shen family, Shen Miao relied on Shen Xian's backing, and no matter what happened, the first person outside would be Shen Miao. Shen Yu was a talented female who was famous in the capital, and only Shen Qing was slightly mediocre. But she still had a son, and now that Shen Qiu was following Shen Xian, in the future he would definitely compete with Shen Yuan Bo for the family property. But now, wasn't Shen Miao being played with by others? Then that eldest saw who had eyes on the top, if she knew that her daughter had done such a shameful thing, would she protect Shen Miao? Or would she give Shen Miao a piece of white silk? Chapter 86. Thinking of this, the panic in Ren Wanyun's heart lessened a little. She looked at the sky. "I will rest for a while." Xiang Lan and Kai Ju saw that she was finally willing to rest and could not help but reveal a happy expression. They quickly helped Ren Wanyun to lie down on the bed and said, "Furin, rest for a while. One still need to preserve one's energy for tomorrow." "Yes." Ren Wanyun muttered, "One still need to preserve one's energy for tomorrow." After all, the wonderful show tomorrow was waiting for her to personally end it. This rain continued for the entire night. In the quiet mountain forest, after the rain, everything withered and became even colder after the autumn rain. The air was filled with a moist fragrance. Early in the morning, the monks in the temple started to strike the bell. The dull sound of the bell woke up the person who was sleeping soundly. Ren Wanyun opened her eyes. This night she did not sleep well and kept having nightmares. She only fell asleep when it was close to dawn, and when she woke up, her forehead was full of sweat. "Furin is awake." Xiang Lan went forward and said, "Wipe your face." After Ren Wanyun washed up, she looked outside. Outside the window, the tranquility after the rain had been restored and the birds were chirping happily. She smiled, "Change into a bright-colored dress. And also that ruby-inlaid emerald flower." She was now middle-aged and was long used to wearing dark-colored clothes. It was rare that she personally picked out bright clothes to wear. Kai Ju smiled, "Furin's mood is not bad. Wearing such a bright color, one would be more spirited." Ren Wanyun looked at the mirror and smiled in satisfaction. Naturally she was in a good mood and could be said to be overjoyed. After everything was prepared, she said, "Let's go. It is time to call my tired niece to have a meal." In the innermost room of the northern pavilion, it was quiet and there was not even a maid in the courtyard. When Ren Wanyun saw it, her gaze was rather satisfied. Thinking that Prince Yu handled matters very well, even the maids were sent away. If it was not for fear of causing trouble, she would have wanted to immediately announce to the world that the person inside had lost her chastity. It was just that for the following methods, she temporarily held it back. "You go and knock on the door," she said to Xiang Lan, and a trace of disgust flashed in her eyes. She also looked down on dirty women, but she had forgotten who was the one who caused Shen Miao to become like this. "Fifth young lady," Xiang Lan walked to the door and knocked, "First Furin is here." There was no sound from the other side of the door, as if there was no one there. "Fifth miss, First Madam is here," Xiang Lan continued. But after knocking on the door for a long time, no one answered. Ren Wanyun sighed and said with a smile, this fifth lady really has the temperament of a child. The sky is already bright and she is still so mischievous. It will not do if the time to burn the incense is delayed. Let me do it. She walked to the door, gently knocked on the door, and softly said, Fifth sister, it's time to get up and eat. After eating, we still have to burn incense. Don't be willful. Still, no one in the room answered her. Ren Wanyun turned around and was somewhat helpless. She did not know if she was explaining to herself or to someone else as she softly said, never mind, just directly push the door open and enter. Wu Jie's maids are also ignorant, leaving without permission like this. When we get back, we must punish them properly. Finished speaking, he was about to push the door open and enter. Second aunt. A light voice sounded in the silence. Ren Wanyun was surprised for a moment and thought that the voice was coming from inside the room, but she heard Xiang Lan and Kai Ju speaking in unison, fifth young lady, second young lady. She turned her head back in surprise and saw Shin Yu and Shin Miao standing together. Today Shin Miao was wearing a snow-white silk dress and a moon-white cloak embroidered with peonies. At first glance, it was as if she was in mourning. To think that Shin Miao was dressed in mourning, one was used to seeing Shin Miao's bright red and green and somewhat rustic attire, this outfit was simply elegant and out of the world. Coupled with her slightly cold expression, there was a kind of moving feeling. Chapter 87. A trace of jealousy flashed in Shin Yu's eyes. She did not know when it started, but this idiot Tang younger sister's appearance was not inferior to hers. But she did not expect that Shin Miao's looks were not bad originally, but because she was deliberately dressed up in a vulgar manner, now her temperament was outstanding, and coupled with her appearance gradually maturing, naturally there was no comparison. Ren Wanyun was also dazzled by Shin Miao's dressing and she frowned. Why is fifth lady dressed so inauspiciously? This white and plain, one would think that our family is having a funeral. Second Shen is wearing bright today. Shin Miao said with a light smile. Ren Wanyun looked at her own clothes and suddenly thought of something as she carefully sized up Shin Miao. She did not know why Shin Miao would come back from outside and look so calm. But last night's matter could be deceived to others but not her. She had the heart to confirm something, so she walked up to Shin Miao and pulled Shin Miao's arm with a smile before asking with concern, did fifth lady sleep well yesterday? Thanking second Shin for the trouble. I slept well. Shin Miao smiled. Ren Wanyun carefully observed Shin Miao's expression and saw that it was not fake, and her heart was somewhat bewildered. When did this Shin Miao train to be able to maintain her composure? Would ordinary females not cry to the heavens and earth when they encounter this kind of matter? Why was she so calm? Could it be that it was all an act? She had clearly heard that miserable female voice last night. Looking at Shin Miao's pair of clear eyes, Ren Wanyun's heart suddenly felt uneasy, and this uneasiness made her somewhat flustered. She smiled as she leaned close to Shin Miao. I am relieved that fifth lady slept well. At first glance, one would discover that Shin Miao's neck was as white as jade. She was originally born with a fair complexion, and at this moment it was like jade. There was not even a trace of stain, not to mention a scar. It was impossible. Prince Yu's methods of playing with females had always been brutal, so how could there not be any traces on Shin Miao's body? Shin Yu looked at Shin Miao and then looked at Ren Wanyun. She felt that something had happened, but she did not know what it was. Ren Wanyun's uneasiness was getting bigger and bigger. She grabbed Shin Miao's hands and said with a smile, this weather is really cold. Is fifth lady not cold from wearing so thin? As she was speaking, Ren Wanyun suddenly pulled Shin Miao's sleeves, and that white sleeves were suddenly pulled up, revealing a white wrist. His arm was white and clean, like the finest mutton fat jade. There was not a single mark on it. Ren Wanyun stood blankly on the spot. Shin Miao withdrew her hand and smiled. Second Shin seems to be inspecting something. No. Ren Wanyun forced a smile. Just now, my hand slipped a little. Her heart was somewhat absent-minded and did not know what expression to make. Why was there not a single scar on Shen Miao's body? She was an experienced person, and not to mention a person like Prince Yu, even an ordinary male would more or less leave a mark on a female's body. Could it be that Prince Yu of the first rank did not have such means on the surface? But Shen Miao's current expression did not look like she had suffered a lot of blows. But Shen Miao maintained such a nonchalant appearance. How could some things be said? Her eyes swept around and only saw Huang Ying and Qing Wan by Shen Yu's side, but did not see Jing Zhe and Gu Yu. Her eyes turned and said, "Where did the two maids beside Fifth Lady go to?" "They disappeared early in the morning. I asked them to bring some porridge over. When I woke up this morning, I felt that my throat was somewhat uncomfortable. This place is far from the kitchen." Ren Wanyun smiled. "This child, just directly say it. But isn't the kitchen in the southern pavilion?" Chapter 88. Not bad. Shen Miao looked at her. "I came over from the southern pavilion." "What nonsense are you saying to second Shen?" Ren Wanyun smiled. "Did you not stay in the northern pavilion last night?" Before she finished speaking, she saw a smile on Shen Miao's face. Ever since she woke up from falling into the water, her expression was very cold, and most of the time it was just a smile, but now this smile seemed to come from the bottom of her heart. It was very bright, but one did not know why, but it made one's heart cold. Ren Wanyun's heart sank as if it was made of lead. "Furen, it is not good. Young lady is missing." Following the female's panicked shouts, what came into view were the two maids' anxious expressions. It was not others but Yan Mei and Shui Bai who were beside Shen Qing. "What did you say?" Ren Wanyun suddenly screamed. Shen Yu was slightly surprised. Shen Qing actually disappeared. She sneaked a glance at Shen Miao, and the latter's expression was magnanimous and calm as if she heard a greeting. "How can Qing disappear?" Ren Wanyun grabbed Yan Mei's collar, and her eyes were as fierce as a mother beast. "Oh, I know about this." Shen Miao suddenly spoke. Everyone's eyes landed on her. In the silence, Shen Miao laughed softly. "I just came over from the southern pavilion." "Why?" "Naturally it is because I was resting in the southern pavilion yesterday. Last night, I really could not sleep, so I went to look for eldest sister, hoping to exchange rooms with her." Eldest sister agreed and most likely felt that with second Shen staying next door, she would be more at ease. "This morning I met second older sister when I went out and came over with second older sister. I wanted to thank eldest sister for being so considerate to exchange rooms with me." With every sentence she said, Ren Wanyun's heart sank a little, and at the end, it was as if despair was overwhelming. The flesh on her cheeks trembled slightly and her eyes turned red, like a wild beast that was about to go crazy. Seeing Ren Wanyun like this, Shen Yu was somewhat afraid. She roughly guessed that something big had happened, but seeing that the first household who had always been secretly at odds with her mother had fallen into such a situation, naturally she rejoiced in other people's misfortune and followed Shen Miao's words. "Correct. Early in the morning this morning, I saw fifth younger sister walking out from the room next door, and at this moment came to look for second younger sister to have a meal together." Shen Miao's voice was as light as a feather, but it heavily hammered on Ren Wanyun's heart, making her so painful that she wanted to vomit blood. "It wasn't me who slept here last night. It was big sister." Ren Wanyun covered her heart and took 2 steps back, almost fainting on the ground. The one who stayed here last night was not Shen Miao, but Shen Qing. Then the female that Prince Yu was playing with was her Qing. Those mournful and miserable cries were all made by her Qing. She was just next door, separated from her daughter by a wall, yet she allowed her daughter to be humiliated. This. How could she accept this? This must be fake. This was impossible. Ren Wanyun's heart was about to break. She looked at the tightly closed door, and for a moment, she did not have the courage to open it. She did not dare to think and did not dare to see what kind of tragic state it would be after opening it. In the midst of the dizziness, she still remembered that she must not let Shin Yu and Shin Miao see what was inside. If it was spread out, if it was spread out. She barely squeezed out a smile that was uglier than crying. You all go back first. I just asked and Qing'er is still sleeping. Let's not wait for her. Shin Miao smiled. Second Shin really know how to joke. Just now one did not know that Big Sister was resting inside and now you said that you have spoken to Big Sister. Could it be that Big Sister is hiding something? No. Ren Wanyun flatly denied it. When this action fell into Shin Yu's eyes, she felt that it was strange. Shin Miao's eyes moved but she shouted towards another figure that was walking over, Gue Momo. May I trouble you to help Second Shin open this door? Gue Momo bent her waist as she walked over. Today she was also instructed to come early and at this moment she had not clearly seen the scene in front of her. When she heard Shin Miao's words, she thought that Shin Miao had already spoken to Ren Wanyun and felt guilty. Gue Momo did not look at Ren Wanyun's face, otherwise she would be able to see that Ren Wanyun's face had turned ashen. Because Gue Momo was close to the door, it was too late for Ren Wanyun to stop her. She then heard a creak sound and the door was slowly pushed open. Everything seemed to be silent. An intriguing smell wafted out from the door. Chapter 89. The doors slowly opened but no one went forward to take a look. The rooms of Wolong Temple's pilgrims were spacious and not as gorgeous as their own residence. In addition, this room was specially selected and was even more spacious. That big bed was in the middle of the room and there was not even a screen to cover it. Because of this, everyone could see the situation in the room at a glance. Shin Yu was the first to scream. She saw the scattered clothes on the floor and it was really torn to pieces. The blanket on the bed was casually thrown to one side and the books on the table were all swept to the floor. The teapot was also broken as if it had experienced a catastrophe. However, the most surprising thing was not this. The female on the bed was lying on the bed and she was almost not covered with a quilt as she was half lying on the side of the bed. On her back, there were spots of red marks and there were also some bloodstains and bruises. It was a ghastly sight. There was also a blood-stained whip under the bed that had been split into two halves. Looking at the marks on the female's body, one could see that the whip was broken. Heavens! Shin Yu covered her mouth and stepped back. Who is that? Could it be eldest sister? She suddenly turned her head to look at Ren Wanyun. Since Shin Miao said that she had exchanged rooms with Shin Qing, the one in the room at the moment should be Ren Wanyun. But everything in front of her clearly showed that something had happened to Shin Qing. Even an unmarried daughter like her knew that the scene in front of her was clearly the traces of a female being violated. Gue Momo also did not expect that there would be someone else in the room. Just now when she heard Shin Miao's words, she thought that Shin Miao had already discussed it with Ren Wanyun and was about to enter the room to talk. In the end, she was already surprised to see a female inside. Could it be that there were other females that were also played with by Prince Yu last night? If that was the case, her task would be ruined, but Shin Yu's words almost made her soul fly away. Shin Qing. The female lying inside was Shin Qing. When Yan Mei and Shui Bai saw Shin Qing like this, their hearts almost turned cold. With such a thing happening to their young lady, there was no way for them to survive. Both of them looked at each other and saw the despair in each other's eyes. They knelt down and kowtowed to Ren Wanyun. Ren Wanyun stood there blankly. Second aunt, are you not going to let me take a look? Shin Qing asked softly amidst the silence. Her tone was calm, as if she did not see the tragic scene in front of her. Ren Wanyun turned her head and saw the young girl looking at her quietly. Great waves rose in her chest, but she quickly suppressed it. She just quickly walked into the room with a pale face, and walked to the side of the woman who was half lying on the bed. The woman's hair was disheveled, and there were many strands of hair on the ground. It was obvious that a lot of her hair had been ripped off. Ren Wanyun shakily stretched out her hands and flipped the female over. With a loud rumble, as if to reflect her mood, the rain that had stopped suddenly fell again. Amidst the accumulated dark clouds, the sound of thunder startled everyone's ears. Ren Wanyun painfully closed her eyes. The woman in her embrace was Qin Qing. The closer he looked, the more shocked he felt. Qin Qing's face was extremely swollen. It was obvious that she had been badly abused. At this moment, there wasn't a single piece of flesh on his body that wasn't damaged. One of her hands was bent into a strange position, as if it had been broken. Prince Yu was too ruthless. But the person she hated the most was Shin Miao. All of this should have been added to Shin Miao, but now it was her Qing'er who suffered. To be tormented to such a state, the rest of Shin Qing's life was almost finished. She could not wait to bite Shin Miao's neck, drink Shin Miao's blood and eat Shin Miao's flesh. Ren Wanyun was after all the head of the Shin residence, so even at this time, she was able to restrain herself from going crazy. Instead, she trembled as she instructed Xiang Lan, "Go find a carriage and immediately descend the mountain." Chapter 90. But Xiang Lan looked at her fearfully. "Furen, at this moment it is raining heavily outside and one is unable to go out." The high mountains and deep valleys of Yangjing Peak were already bumpy, and with the washing of the rain, it was incomparably muddy and one was unable to move forward. If one were to forcefully go down the mountain, one feared that there would be an accident due to the slippery road. One could not go out in this kind of weather. Then what about Qing'er? Ren Wanyun finally could not hold back and screamed out loud. She gave a slap to Xiang Lan and said fiercely, "Then what about my Qing'er?" Outside the room, Shin Miao quietly watched. She stood under the eaves and looked at the rain that covered the landscape and seemed to cover some dirty tricks. The one who should be insulted like this was her. But now the one who let Shin Qing suffer such humiliation was also her. Hearing with one's own ears that her own daughter was humiliated for an entire night, she could have saved but instead stood by and did nothing. Whenever Ren Wanyun thought about it, would she feel a piercing pain in her heart? Would it be as painful as the news of Wanyu's death? Now she wanted to bring Shin Qing back to the city for treatment but had to stay here because of the heavy rain. Unable to advance or retreat, would Ren Wanyun, who was flushed with success, feel a trace of despair? Go find a doctor. No matter what method, go find a doctor. If you cannot find a doctor, then you will die here. Ren Wanyun screamed at Xiang Lan. Most likely Xiang Lan had followed Ren Wanyun for so many years but had never been reprimanded by Ren Wanyun like this before. She felt wronged and afraid as she covered her face and quickly ran out. When she ran out, she could not help but look at Shin Miao. It was obvious that everything was planned and the one who was resting here last night should be Shin Miao. How could it be so coincidental? Shin Qing had never been a person who was easy to talk to, and now that she had a grudge against Shin Miao, she would not agree to change rooms with her. There was definitely something fishy about this matter. She saw that the plain-clothed young female was slender and graceful and clearly had delicate and pleasing brows, but one did not know why there was an evil aura around her. "Kai Ju, go and call a few people over and close the door," Ren Wanyun said with her teeth clenched. When the door was closed, it was as if there were two worlds inside and outside the door. Shin Yu had not recovered from the shock as she looked at Shin Miao and said in disbelief, "Fifth younger sister, was eldest sister humiliated?" Shin Miao declined to comment. Prince Yu of the first rank really intended to play with the other party and left before dawn. He also understood that for a lady from a noble family, having her reputation ruined by an unknown person was the most terrifying thing. But thinking that Prince Yu was not a fool, he would be able to discover some clues soon. After all, this trick was so simple that it was a little violent. She was still immersed in the unfamiliar words and did not know that when her current appearance fell into Shin Yu's eyes, Shin Yu's heart trembled and she quivered. "Fifth younger sister, could it be that you harmed eldest sister?" Last night it was obviously Shin Qing who stayed in the southern pavilion and Shin Miao who stayed in the northern pavilion, but at the end they changed positions and after that this matter happened. If the room was not changed, the one lying there would be Shin Miao. And with Shin Yu's understanding of Shin Qing would definitely not give the room to Shin Miao. Could it be that all of this was done by Shin Miao? Shin Yu looked at Shin Miao as if she was looking at something terrifying. But one heard Shin Miao lightly laugh. Second older sister, rice can be eaten indiscriminately but words cannot be spoken indiscriminately. How would I have that kind of ability to harm eldest sister? You have overestimated me. But Shin Yu's heart was still somewhat suspicious. She did not know why, but she felt that there was something wrong with Shin Miao. And last night's matter was definitely related to Shin Miao. Chapter 91. If one has the heart to worry about these things, it is better to worry about yourself. Shin Miao said. Me? Shin Yu tensed up. What about me? Do you think that after seeing eldest sister's private matter, the two maids by your side can still live? What? It seems that second older sister is really ignorant of the sinister ways of the world. Shin Miao gently smiled. How long do you think that a servant who knows the master's secret, especially when this secret is a scandal, can live? Huang Ying and Qing Wan, who were beside Shin Yu, suddenly turned pale. They naturally knew that in a noble family, there was no lack of dirty and shady matters. Once it was seen by the servants, the only road left for the servants was death, as only dead people could keep secrets. Shin Qing was humiliated by the evildoers and the two maids saw it so naturally there was no way for her to live. Shin Yu turned pale with fright. She was just so shocked that she had forgotten about this matter. It was not that she was a sentimental person, but to groom a personal maid, one had to put in a lot of effort. If they were sacrificed in vain because of this matter and moreover it was the two most suitable ones, how could she be willing? Not only the two of them. Shin Miao gently smiled and her eyes swept across Yan Mei, Shui Bai and Gue Momo who were present with a meaningful gaze. None of them can escape. Gue Momo and the two maids almost fainted. What was there to be afraid of? What was there to be afraid of? When a person achieved Tao, the chickens and dogs would ascend to heaven, but if the master was not good, the servants would also not be able to escape. In the previous life when the Shin family's property was confiscated, these unruly servants who used their power to bully others were also helping outsiders. What kind of master they followed, they would have to accept what kind of ending. Otherwise, to only injure one person at a time, would it not be overkill? She turned to leave and when Shin Yu saw it, she quickly called out to her, "Where are you going? Did you not come to Wulong Temple to offer incense?" Shin Miao lightly answered, "I also have many doubts and naturally have to ask Buddha. Offering incense is not considered as a wasted trip." Dressed in plain clothes, she left just like that and the cold figure did not stop at all, as if such an earth-shattering event had not happened here today. Everything went according to plan. After a night's sleep, he went to burn some incense and pray for peace. Not right. Shin Yu suddenly spoke, "Why are her two maids not here?" Gue Momo was also stunned. Today when Shin Miao met Shin Yu early in the morning, she said that Jing Zhe and Gu Yu would go to the kitchen to get some food and did not appear until now, thus she did not know about Shin Qing's situation. Now thinking about it, how could there be such a coincidence? Shin Qing and Shin Yu's maids had witnessed the scandal and could not escape but Shin Miao's maids were not present. It was obvious that she deliberately sent them away. She had long known that something like this would happen today. She had long known that something would happen to Shin Qing. Shin Qing's current fate was orchestrated by her. Shin Yu turned her head to look and walked along the eaves but Shin Miao's back was already gone. But those clear eyes with hidden sharpness seemed to appear in front of her, causing her to involuntarily feel a chill. At noon, the rain finally stopped. Xiang Lan ran all over the mountain but could not find a doctor. Usually, other than the occasional pilgrims, no one would pay attention to this place. When the monks in the temple fell ill, they would just grab some herbs to boil and eat. Xiang Lan could not find a doctor and could only go to the monks to ask for some calming medicinal herbs and topical medicine for Shin Qing to use. The room was filled with a strange smell of medicinal herbs, and even though it had been cleaned up, that smell still lingered for a long time. The female on the bed had her eyes closed and Ren Wanyun was sitting by the window. In just a few hours, her brows seemed to have aged by 10 years. Chapter 92. The maids in the room did not dare to make a sound. With such a big thing happening, it was difficult to guarantee that their mistress would not be angry. When Ren Wanyun was staring at the curtain in a daze, suddenly Shinqing, who was on the bed, moved. She quickly lowered her head and called out, "Qing'er." Shinqing opened her eyes, and when she saw Ren Wanyun, her eyes revealed a look of horror as she reached out to grab Ren Wanyun's face. "Let me go. Go away. Save me. Qing'er, I am your mother. I am your mother. Do not be afraid, mother is here." Ren Wanyun's heart felt as if it was being cut by a knife, but Shinqing seemed to be unaware of it as she struggled with all her might and kept staring at the ceiling as she screamed crazily. Xianglan and Kai Ju quickly went forward to help hold her down. Shinqing was like a crazy person without any consciousness, and Ren Wanyun did not recognize her at all. With such a struggle, all the medicine that was applied was ruined and those bloody wounds were revealed in front of Ren Wanyun. Ren Wanyun's face was filled with pain and she could not help but scream out, "Ah! Furen!" Xianglan and Kai Ju were shocked and afraid in their hearts. Ren Wanyun had always been one who had her own ideas and would be able to calmly deal with any big matters. In these few years, she had seen quite a lot of big winds and waves, but now she was forced to this point. The two maids who had followed Ren Wanyun for so many years could not help but be shocked. "Where is Shin Miao?" Ren Wanyun spoke aggressively. "Fifth young lady is in the temple," Kai Ju said cautiously. "Take good care of Qing'er. If anything happens to her, both of you do not need to live anymore." Ren Wanyun turned around and walked out of the door. In the Buddhist hall, a huge golden Buddha statue stood towering as it looked down on all the believers with benevolent eyes. In front of the grass, Shin Miao was kneeling on the ground with incense in her hands, but one did not know what she was thinking about. From the morning till now, she had been kneeling here for a few hours. "Young lady, it is better to get up and rest." Jingzhe consoled, "It is not worth it to injure one's body by kneeling. Buddha must have already seen your sincerity, and what you wish for would definitely be realized." What one wish for would definitely be realized? When Shin Miao heard that, her lips pulled out a bitter smile. What she wished for could no longer be realized. Although the mistakes of the previous life could be redone in this life, those who had already passed away in the wrong life would not come back. Her Wanyu, her Fu Ming, did they have a chance to start over? It was likely that it had long since turned into a glimmer of light in this boundless world of mortals, leaving nothing behind. Moreover, she was not a believer. Shin Miao raised her head to look at the huge golden Buddha statue. It was just a cold statue and it was impossible for it to really save all living beings. If the heavens had eyes, how could they let good people end up in such a miserable state? The bad guys are free and unfettered. She knelt there, offering incense stick after incense stick. She was not worshipping Buddha, but someone who had died in her previous life. Those who died because of her. Since her rebirth, she didn't have any opportunity or reason to pay respects to these people, including her non-existent children. Now that she was here, she could only use the incense in front of the Buddha to pay respects to the dead. Shin Miao. An aggressive voice suddenly burst in. Shin Miao smiled. The people of the world like to be impatient. She rubbed her sore knees and stood up. Turning her head, she looked at Ren Wanyun in front of her and said with a smile, "Second Shin." Seeing Shin Miao's smile, Ren Wanyun felt that it was even more ear-piercing. She quickly stepped forward and raised her palm to slap Shin Miao's face. Jingzhe and Guyu wanted to stop her, but it was already too late. The expected crisp sound did not appear. Shin Miao grabbed onto Ren Wanyun's arm and her palm stopped in front of her. One do not know why second Shen is so impulsive. Even though you can discipline me on behalf of father and mother, but to hit others without any explanation, one fear that ordinary families do not have such a rule. She said. Chapter 93. Ren Wanyun did not expect that Shin Miao would actually block her slap. The young female in front of her was slender, but it was very painful to hold her arm. That Tang niece, who was originally the most obedient, easy to coax and the one who could be held in the palm of one's hand, had actually grown taller. She could no longer use the gaze that she used when she was young to look down on her. If she was not careful, she would be plotted against by this little slut who did not even blink. She put down her hand unwillingly and gritted her teeth. Shin Miao, do not pretend to be stupid. Qing's matter was done by you, right? Now that Shin Qing was not in a clear state of mind, there was no way to know how the matter came to this stage. But Ren Wanyun was also clear that if this matter was not related to Shin Miao, she would not believe even if she was beaten to death. She did not know what methods Shin Miao used, but to touch Shin Qing and make her become like this, she would definitely not let it off lightly. I am also very regretful that eldest sister was harmed by evil people, but how can second Shin suspect me? Shin Miao gently smiled. After all, if eldest sister and I did not change rooms, the person who would be harmed today would be me. I am not able to do such a dangerous thing. Then the person who would be harmed today would be me. It was better if she did not say it, but when she said it, Ren Wanyun felt that her brain was jumping and hurting. She clenched her hands tightly and her eyes were like a sinister snake, that should be born by you. It was you who let Qing'e be harmed in your place. When Jingzhe and Guyu saw Ren Wanyun like this, their hearts were shocked and angry. They were shocked that this second Furen, who had always put on a kind appearance, had shed all pretense of cordiality and was actually so cruel. They were angry that if it was not for Shin Miao's alertness last night, the three of them, master and servants, would not have a good ending today. But Ren Wanyun actually blamed it. This was simply the evil person complaining first. She did not want any face at all. Second Shin must not say that. There is still Buddha above. Shin Miao chuckled, and as her eyes moved, there seemed to be a strange light in her eyes. Everything in this world has a final conclusion. Last night the one who had an accident was not me but eldest sister. Perhaps it was also predestined. Second Shin did not blame the evildoers and did not blame the heavens but instead blame me. What kind of logic is this? Ren Wanyun was almost angered by Shin Miao to the point that people and horses almost flipped over as she sneered, "You are really eloquent. It was me who looked down on you in the past." Oh, Second Shin actually looks at me like this. Shin Miao smiled without much care. Ren Wanyun looked at Shin Miao in front of her. The plain-clothed young female had a gentle demeanor and there were signs of her delicate facial features. She had already started to lose the original immaturity, and one did not know when it started, but that stupid idiot Shin Miao had completely disappeared. The Shin Miao of the past could not be found in front of this person. She had been playing politics in the inner courtyard for so many years. This was the first time she had fallen into the hands of a little girl, and she had paid such a painful price. The more graceful Shin Miao was, the more it reminded her of Shin Qing's misery as she lay on the bed. Shin Miao, if you are pretending to be confused, I might as well tell you honestly. Ren Wanyun suddenly laughed sarcastically. Since they had already shed all pretense of cordiality, there was no need to put on a mask of kindness. She said, "Do you think this is over? Old madam won't let you off, your second uncle won't let you off, and that person will also not let you off. Your ending will definitely be tens of thousands of times more miserable than Qing'e. You will definitely be pillowed by thousands of people and forever be reduced to a slut that cannot be seen in public. Furen, be careful with your words." Jingzhe and Guyu spoke in unison. This Ren Wanyun was the second Furen of the Shin residence, and in any case Shin Gui was also part of the officialdom. Ren Wanyun usually looked amiable and noble but would actually say such vicious and vulgar curses. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were enemies. Shin Miao was still young, and if her ears were to be polluted by such filthy words, how could it be? Chapter 94. Ren Wanyun then seemed to notice Jing Zhe and Gu Yu and sneered, "You even put in so much effort to protect two maids. I want to see how long you can protect them." Finishing, she looked strangely at Shin Miao before turning around and leaving with a flick of her sleeves. After Ren Wanyun left, Jing Zhe and Gu Yu looked at Shin Miao in panic. Gu Yu said worriedly, "Young lady, is it really good to shed all pretense of cordiality with her? Eventually it will be torn apart. No matter how well it is maintained on the surface, she would not have the slightest bit of soft-heartedness. What is the point of doing something that is a waste of effort?" Shin Miao said. The way of survival in the harem was that if the enemy was in the light, then let them be in the light. If they were in the dark, then think of a way to let them be in the light. She did not have the mood to play a superficial game with Ren Wanyun. This game was like a storm from the beginning, and Ren Wanyun had already lost her mind due to her anger. What would happen next would definitely be a crazy revenge. But after returning to the residence, old Furen would definitely favor them. Jing Zhe said softly. Old Shin Furen favored the second household the most, not only because Shin Gue was old Shin Furen's biological son, but also because Ren Wanyun gave birth to two sons for Shin Gue. Needless to say about Shin Yuanbo, the second household's eldest son, who was currently in another place, would also return to the Ding capital at the end of the year. With two grandsons, how could old Shin Furen not favor the second household? Moreover, when Ren Wanyun opened her mouth to please old Shin Furen till she was dizzy, no matter what she said when she returned, it was all Ren Wanyun's idea, so who would believe Shin Miao's words? So be it. I didn't expect these people to make decisions for me anyway. Shin Miao smiled. When her smile fell into Gu Yu's eyes, Gu Yu's nose turned sour and suddenly said, "If it is really so, this servant will take this matter out to threaten. If young lady has anything bad, even if this servant has to risk this life, this matter will be spread to the world." Not bad. Jing Zhe's expression also turned cold. Even though this method of killing 3,000 enemies and losing 10,000 oneself is somewhat stupid, but at that time, one would not let them have an easy time. Shin Miao was somewhat stunned, as she did not expect the two maids beside her to have such boldness. After being surprised for a while, she smiled. That's right. In order to protect her, Gu Yu admitted to the crime of stealing the imperial palace's jade wares and was executed by the crown prince of the Qin country. Jing Zhe used her beauty to entice the powerful minister and willingly became a concubine and was beaten to death by the wife of that powerful minister. The two of them had always been loyal to her. It was a pity that she couldn't give them anything in her previous life. Now that he was reborn, he had to protect these girls no matter what. Some mistakes only needed to be made once. There's no need for that. I didn't intend to spread this news. Second aunt won't let it spread out. Then wouldn't this matter be covered up? But after all, paper cannot wrap fire. If eldest young lady were to get married, it would naturally be discovered. Gu Yu was somewhat puzzled. Even if he could hide it for a while, he couldn't hide it forever. Unless Shin Qing didn't marry for the rest of her life, everyone would know that she would lose her chastity once she married. So, they will definitely find a way to deceive everyone. As for how they want to deal with me, it's nothing more than asking that person for help. That person? Jing Zhe questioned closely, who is that person? Naturally it is that evil person who humiliated eldest sister. Shin Miao chuckled, could it be that you all really think that last night was an accident? Jing Zhe's and Gu Yu's body trembled. Even though they had already faintly guessed some signs, they were not willing to believe it. They did not believe that there would be someone who would harm Shin Miao like this. This method was just too vicious, to force one to a dead end. They did not believe that Shin Miao would be able to predict the future, and even more did not believe that it was the second household of the Shin family who did such a thing. Even though they knew that the people in the eastern courtyard did not have good intentions, they did not expect that it would be to such a state. This kind of method was obviously used to deal with enemies. Chapter 95. Young lady. Was it really done by second Furin? Guyu opened her mouth with difficulty. If it was just an accident, they would feel fortunate that Shin Miao escaped that night, but if it was intentional, then the second household of the Shin family could only reap what they sowed. But why would young lady say that second Furin looked for that person to help? That person did not casually find a person. Jing Zhe was somewhat dizzy. If Ren Wanyun casually found someone to taint Shin Miao's innocence, now that it was a freak combination of factors, Ren Wanyun could not wait to kill that person, so why would she let that person help? Because that person is Prince Yu of the first rank. Jing Zhe and Guyu sucked in a breath of cold air. The things that they did not understand before, now they seemed to understand. If that person was Prince Yu of the first rank, then everything would be clear. Previously it was seen that Prince Yu of the first rank seemed to be interested in Shin Miao, but what kind of person was Prince Yu? Ordinary females would make a detour when they saw him. If Prince Yu of the first rank had a private deal with Ren Wanyun, then Ren Wanyun would most likely help Prince Yu to humiliate Shin Miao. But now that both of them were in a freak combination of factors, if Ren Wanyun were to inform this matter to Prince Yu of the first rank, with Prince Yu's temperamental temperament, he would definitely not let Shin Miao off after being deceived under his eyelids. Young lady, now. Do you want to write a letter to master? Guyu and Jing Zhe panicked. Prince Yu of the first rank was an existence that one could not go against. Forget about power, forget about temperament, there was still the imperial family as a shield. No harm. Shin Miao's eyes strangely brightened. Shin Qing is only a primer. The one that I want to deal with is Prince Yu of the first rank. She turned her head to look at the green smoke curling up from the Buddhist shrine. Wan Yua, your life is really hard. You are like a flower at such an age, but your youth is gone forever. You have the title of a princess, but you are not even comparable to grass. Mother cannot do anything for you, at least now, at least in this lifetime. Mother will help you get back at those who had bullied you. In a certain pavilion outside the Ding capital, the white-clad gentleman was playing with the porcelain cup in his hand and said curiously, so to say, that Shin family girl actually had enmity with Prince Yu? Using her own Tangjie's hands to slowly pull Prince Yu into the pit, her methods were indeed brilliant, but as a female, she was too ruthless. He shook his head with a regretful expression. Prince Yu of the first rank? The purple-clad youth opposite him smiled and the pair of eyes on his handsome face were as sharp as a blade. He lazily said, I think that the one she wants to deal with is not Prince Yu. Not Prince Yu of the first rank. Who is that? The man in white paused and looked at the person in front of him. You think? How about using Prince Yu as the entrance to kill into the Ming Qi imperial family? The youth lightly answered. A burst of autumn rain and a burst of cold. However, after a night of autumn rain, there was no longer any trace of summer heat. Even the rising sun in the sky seemed bleak and bleak. In the Shin residence, the eastern courtyard was still a busy scene. It was old Furin's birthday at the end of the year and old Shin Furin loved extravagance and would start preparing for the birthday a few months in advance. The expenses were naturally not small as Ren Wanyun was in charge of the money. Even though Ren Wanyun ate a lot of it, but every time it was done, it looked rather imposing. And the matter of writing the invitations and sending the wooden paper to the Furins and young ladies of the residence, fell on the third household's Furin, the talented female Chen Roqiu. Even though she was already middle-aged, Chen Roqiu still maintained the figure of a young female. Perhaps it was the scholarly air that added a lot of bearing to her, as compared to the plump Ren Wanyun, Chen Roqiu's appearance was a notch higher. It was because of her beautiful appearance, gentle temperament and her ability to recite poems that the third master of the Shin residence, Shin Wan, was completely bewitched. After being married for many years, even if Chen Roqiu did not have any children and only had Shin Yu as a daughter, other than the 2 Tongfang that old Shin Furin stuffed into him, Shin Wan did not have any other concubines. Chapter 96. Among the 3 sons in the Shin residence, each had a different temperament. Shin Xian was upright and resolute but was too boorish and not attentive enough, and was somewhat loyal. Shin Gue was good at flattering and was successful in the officialdom but was greedy for money and lustful. Other than Ren Wanyun, there were a few concubines in the residence. It was just that Ren Wanyun's methods were powerful, and even though there were many concubines, there was only one Shu daughter and was not able to threaten the position of a D child. Third Master Shin Wan, on the other hand, had genuine talent and genuine knowledge. If one were to say that among the 3 sons, Shin Xian followed the old general and walked the path of a military official, Shin Gue and Shin Wan walked the path of a civil official, then compared to his second older brother, Shin Wan had some real ability. But this did not mean that Shin Wan did not have any flaws. He did not like beauties and only had Chen Roqiu as his official wife, but he placed too much importance on power and only wanted to climb up. For this, he even stepped on his own superior. At this moment, Ren Wanyun was carefully writing an invitation. The sun shone through the window and slanted onto her body. It made her facial features as soft as a young female's. Shin Gue was tidying his collar and could not help but smile when he saw it. He walked to her side and hugged her from behind. Yeah. Chen Roqiu rebuked, "What is master doing? It caused me to not write the words well and waste an invitation in vain. Let me see." Shin Wan pretended to pick up the invitation to take a look and commented, "The handwriting is graceful, just like the owner of the words. How is it not written well?" Chen Roqiu's pretty face blushed. When Shin Wan saw it, his mind could not help but sway. Even after so many years, this wife of his still had a kind of attractive magic that made him unable to see other females. This was Chen Roqiu's brilliance. There were so many daughters in the Chen family, but only she could firmly grasp her husband's heart. It was not because of anything else but her forbearance. Whatever type of female Shin Wan liked, she would become that. One's character could be changed, one's clothes could be changed, and one could cater to one's liking. After a long time, a male would be like raising a cat or a dog and would only have one in his eyes. Second sister-in-law should be back today. Chen Roqiu snuggled in Shin Wan's embrace. One do not know if Yuer is used to the food in the temple or if the mountain roads are bumpy. Shin Wan laughed. What are you blindly worrying about? Second sister-in-law will not let Yuer starve or freeze. Seeing that Chen Roqiu still had a worried look, he said with a smile, "You always treat Yuer as a child. Now Yuer is already so big and would reach the age of marriage in a few years. What will you do then? When Yuer marries, I will naturally pick a perfect marriage for her. Since Yuer is getting married, I will pick a perfect marriage for her." That night when old Shin Furen spoke to Ren Wanyun and Chen Roqiu, she proposed to secretly give Shin Miao to Prince Yu, and as Prince Yu wished, to support the second and third household of the Shin family, Chen Roqiu told her husband about it. Shin Wan naturally agreed. He had been infatuated with power all his life, but no matter how he climbed up, his power and reputation were all inferior to Shin Xian. He was jealous of the first household for many years and did not have any feelings for Shin Miao. If Prince Yu obtained Shin Miao and was happy, he would promote him in the official circles. To Shin Wan, it would be an unexpected joy. As for Shin Miao's future, Shin Wan did not care at all if she could live well in the rest of her life. One do not know if second sister-in-law's matter is settled. Shin Wan's expression became serious. When Chen Roqiu saw it, her heart slightly sank. She knew that her husband had always placed power first. Even though Chen Roqiu did not care about the first household, but for females, it was inevitable that the fox grieves for the rabbit's death. This time Ren Wanyun suddenly mentioned to go to a long temple to offer incense, and those in the know knew that there must be some hidden reasons. One feared that after this trip up the mountain, when they return, they would hear Shin Miao's grievous news. Chapter 97. Do not worry. She said softly, Second Saw has always done things properly. This matter, It should be a foolproof plan. Hope so. Shin Gui nodded his head. Just as both of them were talking, they suddenly saw Chen Rochio's first-ranked maid Shi Qing running in with a flustered face. Furen, second Furen has brought the three young ladies back. Seeing Shi Qing's expression, Chen Rochio was much more relieved and knew that the matter was most likely successful. She smiled and looked at Shin Gui, then changed her expression to one of concern. She asked Shi Qing, "Are the three young ladies all right? Are they tired?" "No. Not good." Shi Qing stammered, "Eldest young lady has gone crazy." Chen Rochio's smile abruptly stopped. Everything was like a dream. The orderly Shin residence was in a mess in just a short day. Shin Qing had gone crazy. The second household's Ren Wanyun usually had the air of a matriarch of the household. Even though she always had a smiling face, her thunderous methods were seen by everyone. No matter how her character was, for so many years, the Shin residence did not have any problems under her management and her ability to manage the household was recognized by everyone. However, this noble matriarch who was always smiling calmly, for the first time revealed a tired and crazy look in front of the servants. If it was not for the maids beside her, one feared that others would have thought that she was a crazy woman that ran out of nowhere. And the young lady in her embrace was really an out-and-out lunatic. She kept screaming and struggling, and even old Shin Furen was alarmed. Even though one did not know the reason, but the fact that the eldest young lady of the Shin family had gone crazy was true. But the Shin residence was also very taboo with regards to this matter. Those maids who saw Shin Qing's crazy state were all sold out. It was said that they were sold out, but who knew if they were buried in a mass grave? The two maids by Shin Qing's side, the two maids by Shin Yu's side, and even Gue Momo were all locked up. As a result, only Shin Miao was unscathed. In Rongjing Tang, old Shin Furen sat on the high seat and her face was taut. Her eyes were staring at Shin Miao, who was standing in the middle, like a poisonous snake that wanted to eat people. Three perfectly fine young ladies went, and those that should have an accident did not have an accident, but those that should not have an accident had an accident. The person who was supposed to bear all this was standing here, but it was the second branch's Shin Qing who had suffered. Just thinking of this matter, old Shin Furen's chest was so stuffy that it felt like a stone was stuck in it. Chen Rochio and Shin Wan stood at one side and Shin Yu stood by Chen Rochio's side, feeling wronged. Her two personal maids were locked up for no reason, and previously she heard from Shin Miao that it would be very difficult to protect Huang Ying and Qing Wan. On the other side, Ren Wanyun was kneeling in front of old Shin Furen. Shin Wan had matters in court today and had not returned to the residence. The servant that invited him had not returned yet, so naturally he did not know that something had happened to his daughter. "Old Furen, you must seek justice for Qing'er." Ren Wanyun was crying and Shin Wan was somewhat surprised. This second Saw, who had always put on airs, was now in such a carefree manner. It was really an eye-opener, and Chen Rochio's heart was somewhat pleased. Ren Wanyun had always relied on her power to manage the family and did not put the third household in her eyes. Now that something had happened to her daughter, she could only crawl on the ground like a dog. "Fifth lady, I have treated you as my own, and Qing'er had given in to you in everything. You are sisters of the same blood, and not to mention mutually supporting each other, but how can you be so vicious? Do you know that Qing'er's entire life was ruined by you? You have such a ruthless heart." Shin Yu told Chen Rochio and Shin Wan about the matter of Shin Qing being humiliated, and all the servants here were expelled, so Chen Rochio was not afraid of being heard by others. Just as Shin Miao was about to speak, she suddenly heard an angry shout from behind, "Evil girl, you poison your sister and have a heart like a snake or scorpion. You should go to jail and die without pity." Shin Miao smiled coldly and turned around to face the man who was striding over. Her second uncle, Shin Qing's father, Shin Gui. Chapter 98. Shin Gui, who was still wearing his official robe, strode into the hall. It was obvious that he had hurried over after hearing the news about Shin Qing. When Ren Wanyun saw this, she immediately cried even more miserably, Master. Qing or Shi, the relationship between Ren Wanyun and Shen Gui was not that deep, otherwise Shen Gui would not bring concubines into the residence one after another. Even so, Shen Gui and Ren Wanyun still treated each other with respect. Not because of anything else, Ren Wanyun was able to manage the Shen residence in an orderly manner and was also able to be on good terms with the Furens of Shen Gui's colleagues. As a good wife, Shen Gui was quite satisfied with Ren Wanyun, so he would definitely not drop the face that he should give. Shen Miao. Shen Gui turned his head and looked angrily at the young female in the hall. He knew the reason why Ren Wanyun brought the 3D daughters to Wulong Temple. Bringing the 3D young ladies of the Shen residence was to prevent others from gossiping. Who would have thought that it was his daughter, Qin Qing, who was in trouble? The servant who came to pass the message secretly told him that everything was Shen Miao's doing. Even though he felt that it was inconceivable, but now he had to vent his anger on one person. Since he couldn't vent his anger on the second branch, he would push all the blame onto the first branch. You harmed your sisters with vicious methods. Since Big Brother isn't here today, I'll teach you a good lesson on behalf of Big Brother. As he spoke, he shouted, Please punish me. Asking for domestic discipline. Chen Roqiu and Shen Gui looked at each other. Ever since Chen Roqiu married into the Shen family, she had never seen the Shen residence's family laws. Hearing from Shen Gui, those family laws were only used on Yin Yang who had committed a wrong, and the descendants of the Shen residence had never used it before. The Shen family was a family of generals, so the family rules were naturally unusual. The servant very quickly carried a long wooden box over. Shen Yu was looking at it curiously, but when she saw the long wooden box open and the things inside were revealed to everyone, she could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. It was a long horsewhip. Who knew what it had been soaked in for many years? It looked black and glossy, and it was as thick as half a grown man's wrist. One look was enough to tell how strong it was. If he was hit by the whip, he would probably lose half his life. If he was more ruthless, it would be easy for him to lose his life. Not bad. Old Shen Furen was putting on airs, and when she saw her son return, she sat even straighter. She had some sincerity towards Shen Qing, and when she saw that her granddaughter met with an accident, her heart was angry. Since Shen Gui had spoken, she would naturally go with the flow. Since Wu Yue has made a mistake, as her younger brother, you should naturally teach her a lesson on behalf of your older brother. Our Chen family has always had a complete set of rules. If you make a mistake, then you must be punished by the family. Fifth girl, you should be glad that your second uncle is kind and dotes on you. Otherwise, it wouldn't be as simple as asking for the family's punishment. We will open the ancestral hall and invite the elders of the family to judge, and you will be expelled from the Chen family. Speaking till here, her gaze suddenly moved. That's right, wouldn't it be better if Shen Miao was expelled from the Shen family? Seeing old Shen Furen's expression, Chen Roqiu secretly called her a fool in her heart. If Shen Miao was expelled from the Shen residence, then with Shen Xian's character, he would definitely leave together with the first household. Although they couldn't bear to see the first branch doing well, they had to rely on the first branch for many things. This old woman's thoughts were so simple. She was really a songstress and could not be seen in public. Ren Wanyun was also startled when she heard it and more or less guessed old Shen Furen's thoughts. She did not wish for Shen Miao to be expelled from the Shen residence, not for any other reason, but because Shen Miao could not be so easily taken advantage of. She could not wait to keep Shen Miao in the Shen residence, so that there would be more ways to retaliate against Shen Miao. It was just being expelled from the family, how could it be such a simple matter? But in everyone's thoughts, one could only hear Shen Miao lightly sighing as she turned to look at Shen Gui. Chapter 99. Shen Gui was shocked by her inexplicable action and stared at her with a frown. He often put on airs in the official circles and his official prestige was not small. If it was a normal person that was stared at by him like this, one fear that the person's imposing manner would soften by 3 points. But Shin Miao did not move at all. Her expression was calm and her eyes were unperturbed, which made Shin Gui have an absurd illusion. It was as if Shin Miao was a high and mighty person and he was just a servant. This illusion was interrupted by Shin Miao's words, "Second Shu is indeed kind-hearted. Eldest sister is bedridden, but second Shu is not in a hurry to check on her condition and instead is busy disciplining me on behalf of my father. Most likely second Shu really dotes on me, even more than eldest sister." When those words were spoken, everyone in the room was silent. A trace of ridicule flashed in Chen Rochio's eyes and Shin Wan frowned. Old Shin Furen's expression changed and Shin Yu opened her mouth, but Ren Wanyun lowered her head and secretly clenched her fists. If one were to talk about the 3 masters in the residence, even though Shin Xian ignored Shin Miao, he still truly doted on Shin Miao. Shin Wan cherished Chen Rochio and loved Shin Yu like a jewel. Only Shin Gui. Shin Gui was originally a greedy and lustful person and did not have any responsibility as a father. He treated his 2 sons better, but towards Shin Qing, this daughter, he did not discipline her at all. Most likely in Shin Gui's eyes, it would be best if Shin Qing could marry into a noble family in the future and add a helping hand to his power. This time when Shin Qing met with an accident, the reason why Shin Gui was so angry was not because of his heartache for his daughter's miserable experience, but because his plans were disrupted by others and he feared that Prince Yu would get angry after knowing about it. He was also angry that Shin Miao had lost a daughter who could help his career in the future. In the end, it was all about the word benefits. If it was a father who truly doted on his daughter, after knowing about the matter, he would definitely go back to visit his daughter first. How would he rush back just to discipline the instigator? As such, one felt some pity for Shin Qing. A trace of awkwardness flashed on Shin Gui's face. Shin Miao's words hit the nail on the head and he could not help but feel embarrassed. When he looked at Ren Wanyun again, she had indeed turned her head away and no longer looked at him. Shin Gui was somewhat surprised in his heart, and when he looked at Shin Miao again, there was some thought in his eyes. Just one sentence was able to separate the husband and wife. This provocation was accurate and ruthless. Shin Qing was Ren Wanyun's lifeblood, but to Shin Gui, she was just a tool that could be used. To use this matter to make the husband and wife, who had a common enemy, unhappy with each other, Shin Miao's method was clearly that of an old fox in the officialdom. The young girl in front of him had delicate features and looked extremely docile. However, for some reason, there seemed to be a faint majesty flickering around her that made people not dare to look at her directly. Suppressing the amazement in his heart, Shin Gui said angrily, "Shin Miao, you still do not know how to reflect until now. Since it is like this, if I do not teach you properly today, I would be ashamed as a son and also ashamed to face your father." He reached out to take the whip. Shin Yu stared closely at Shin Gui's actions and was somewhat rejoicing in his misfortune and also somewhat nervous. Would Shin Gui continue to fight? Shin Miao was so tyrannical, but in the face of such a scene, she could only bow her head and admit defeat. How will second uncle teach me? Using this whip to kill people to silence them? Or to beat them half to death and send them to the manor? Shin Miao suddenly opened her mouth. Shin Gui's actions froze. Shin Wan was also startled. Most likely he did not think that Shin Miao's hostility would be so heavy. Even though Shin Miao had changed these days, everyone had always felt that it was just a pretense of toughness. But now in front of the entire Shin residence, she did not even pretend and just unreservedly shed all pretenses for everyone to see. Evil female, what words are you saying? Old Shin Furen was the first to shout angrily, could it be that you want to say that your second uncle intended to murder you? This is simply going against the heavens. Chapter 100. Yes, fifth mother. How can you say that? Chen Rochio finally opened her mouth, but she still poured oil on the fire without batting an eyelid. You harmed Qing, how can you put the blame on the reverse? Where did you learn this rule from? Chen Roqiu thought that if Shin Miao and the second household were both injured, then her Shin Yu would be like a fish back in water in this Shin residence. After all, they were the third household and Shin Wan's power was not as great as the first household and the number of heirs was not as great as the second household. If one did not use some means, this huge Shin residence would only be taken advantage of by others. Ren Wanyun cried as she kowtowed to old Shin Furen, "See, fifth lady hates us like this." She harmed Qing but did not repent and even wanted to tarnish master's reputation. To be this arrogant, it is obvious that she is using eldest Bo's power to bully us. Could it be that she learned this from eldest Bo? How would a young lady like fifth lady know so much? There must be someone behind her who taught her to do so. We and eldest Bo support each other, so how could eldest Bo's family treat each other like this? Ren Wanyun's tearful complaints were extremely loud and put herself in a weak position. The tougher she was usually, the weakness that she showed at this moment made others believe that what she said was true. Unfortunately, she dragged Shin Xian into it. Dragons have reverse scales and the current Shin Xian was Shin Miao's reverse scale. Her eyes swept across everyone in Rongjing Tang. They were like tigers eyeing their prey. They were one family and they could turn black into white and the dead into alive. Being surrounded by them, she was like a piece of fat meat that fell into the mouth of a hungry wolf. But what could these glib tongues do? There were so many females in the inner palace who could speak well, but how many of them were left behind and how many of them became fertilizer for the flourishing flowers in the imperial garden? Second Shin kept saying that it was I who harmed eldest sister. Then let me ask Second Shin a few questions. Can Second Shin help me dispel my doubts? Ren Wanyun was surprised for a moment, and when she met Shin Miao's clear eyes, she did not know why she felt a little guilty. But when she saw the surrounding people, she was relieved. Everyone here were on her side, so what ability did Shin Miao have to reverse the universe? Ask away. She wiped her tears. All right. Shin Miao's lips hooked up, let me ask. That day Second Shin stayed next to eldest sister and was very close. If anything happened, how could Second Shin not hear it? Ren Wanyun was stunned. If eldest sister had resisted, she would have made a sound. That day, eldest sister's body was full of scars. I think she would have struggled to call for help. Second aunt was so close, why didn't she hear it? Could it be that he heard it but was too tired to come out to take a look? You. Ren Wanyun wanted to open her mouth to refute, but her palms broke out in cold sweat. Of course, maybe second aunt didn't hear the call for help at all. Why? It's naturally because big sister didn't call for help at all. Big sister, why didn't you call for help? Could it be that you know the bad guy? You are talking nonsense. This time Ren Wanyun could no longer bear it and sharply interrupted Shin Miao's words. In the end, Shin Gui and Shin Wan were men and their thoughts were not as meticulous as women. They did not think too much about the matters of the inner courtyard. But Chen Roqiu and Ren Wanyun almost immediately understood. The gaze that looked at Shin Miao was filled with fear. Naturally the former was shock and the latter was fear. Shin Miao's words were very scary. Yes, that day Ren Wanyun and Shin Qing's room were so close. If Shin Qing called for help, how could she not hear it? If she heard it, why did she not go over to take a look? Could it be that Ren Wanyun did it on purpose? Naturally Ren Wanyun would not deliberately harm her own daughter, but at that time the one who stayed there should be Shin Miao. Ren Wanyun had no reason to harm her own daughter, but it was not impossible to harm her Tang niece. Shin Miao directly said it out, and those secret plans in Ren Wanyun's heart appeared in front of everyone. Chapter 101. And the other possibility that she thought of was that Shin Qing did not call for help at all. Why was that? Could it be that it was intentional that she did not call for help after suffering such humiliation? Why was it intentional? This kind of matter, if it was a small matter, it would be that she was humiliated by the villain, and if it was a big matter, perhaps Shin Qing would be accused of having an illicit relationship with another. This world was not easy for women and it was better to be safe than sorry. Once a rumor started, it would be very difficult to extinguish it. Shen Miao smiled gently. Second Shen, I think that there are many points of doubt in this matter. Since Second Shu is fair and reasonable, why not send me to the Yamen's Inspector General's office and have an open and honest trial? I will definitely tell everything that I know to Darren and let Darren decide. Perhaps even know who the villain is. No. Ren Wanyun and Shen Gui spoke at the same time. Ren Wanyun said no because she was afraid that there would be complications. If Shen Miao were to say those words just now, people with discerning eyes would be able to see that there was something fishy about it. There were many large families in the Ding capital and it was alright to hide these things, but once it was spread out, it was not that no one would be able to see the truth of her murdering her cousin's niece. Moreover, if this matter was really set out, did Shen Qing still want her innocence? If those rumors and slanders were to spread, one feared that Shen Qing would use a piece of white silk to end her own life. Shen Gui said no, but it was the complete opposite of what Ren Wanyun thought. He was afraid that this matter would implicate Prince Yu. Now that Prince Yu was able to support him because of Shen Miao. Originally this matter was already messed up as Shen Miao and Shen Qing's identity had changed. After Prince Yu knew the truth, he would definitely be furious, and if he were to be implicated in any other case and cause trouble for Prince Yu, one fear that Shen Gui's career as an official would be exceptionally difficult. Therefore, the husband and wife who were aggressive just now stopped Shen Miao's suggestion in unison. Then what else does Second Shu want to do? Shen Miao's eyes swept over the long horse whip in Shen Gui's hands and casually asked, still want to request for the family law? The people in the room were silent for a moment as Shen Yu stared at Shen Miao incredulously. Even Shen Yu could see that she was threatening. As if to reflect the surprise in everyone's heart, Shen Miao laughed softly. If Second Shu were to request for the family law, there is no way, but I have always had a stubborn temperament. That scoundrel wanted me to carry a crime that does not belong to me. When father returns, I will definitely think of ways to report to the Yamen. The meaning behind her words was, today Shen Gui had hit her and in the future when Shen Xian returned, she would definitely complain and even urge Shen Xian to go to the Yamen to complain, saying that she was the perpetrator. Who knows who she would be suing in the end? Second uncle, are you going to invite him or not? If you're going to invite him, please hurry up. Shen Miao's clear eyes were smiling and there was a hint of ridicule in her words. After all, there are so many people and I cannot escape. Simply described Rong Jing Tang's group of people as bandits, as if in the next moment they would order people to hold Shen Miao down and beat her up. Shen Gui had never thought that in the officialdom, he was able to speak the language of people and speak the language of ghosts. He thought that he would be able to deal with any situation like a fish in water, but he did not expect that he would be threatened by his own niece. It was not that he could not think of a way to deal with it, but Shen Miao did not give him a chance to react from the beginning to the end. It was Shen Miao who was speaking, and the more it went on, the sharper and more aggressive her words made one unable to avoid it. There was a flash of surprise in Shen Wan's eyes. This second older brother of his was a wily old fox in the court, and even those political enemies had not forced him into such a difficult situation before. And the one who forced him into such a situation was just a 14-year-old young lady. Was the first household really so indestructible? Shen Wan's eyes darkened. Chapter 102. You. Shen Gui's face was somewhat red. Today he did it in a moment of anger, and in his heart, Shen Miao was still that yes-man and gullible niece. Even if she was beaten and was really punished by the family laws, she would not dare to speak of today's matter. Who knew that Shen Miao would change, and one did not know when she became such a thorn. Not only did she not submit to adversity, she even counterattacked him and made him unable to step down. If he was not afraid of Shen Xian, Shen Gui really wished that he could kill Shen Miao right now. Old Shen Furen, who had been sitting in the hall silently, saw that her son was forced to such a situation, and a trace of anger flashed in her eyes when she looked at Shen Miao. She then suppressed it and said in a deep voice, "Enough." The hall became solemn again and Shingue sighed in relief. Everyone looked towards old Shinfuren. Even though old Shinfuren did not know anything about the court and foreign affairs, she was an expert in the battles in the inner courtyard. Shin Miao's sharpness in dealing with Shingue and wife made her unable to help but cast sidelong glances. However, the more intelligent Shin Miao was, the more venomous her heart was. It was just that Shin Miao now held Shin Qing's reputation in her hands and could even threaten Shingue. This made old Shinfuren not dare to act rashly. She coldly said, "Fifth girl, your second shoe's words are reasonable. It is just that the family laws can be passed off as you are still young. But this matter can be considered to have started because of you. Since eldest girl has suffered for you, you should go to the ancestral hall to kneel and atone for your eldest sister's crimes. From today onwards, you will be grounded. You will kneel in the ancestral hall and copy Buddhist scriptures. Only when eldest girl is better, then you can come out." She actually had the intention to lock Shin Miao up. Shin Yu was somewhat disappointed when she heard it. She still wanted to see Shin Miao being beaten by the family laws until she could not get off the bed or be banished from the family. Who knew that it was just a superficial confinement? One had to know that when Shin Xin returned in a few months, Shin Miao's confinement would naturally be lifted and at that time everything would be the same as before. Ren Yun was also somewhat dissatisfied, but Shin Miao's words just now shocked her to the point that she did not dare to act rashly. At this moment her heart was in a mess and could not think of a better way. Even though she had some complaints about old Shinfuren's words, she knew that it was an expedient measure and did not say anything. "Oh." Shin Miao's voice was slightly dragged out. Her tone was clearly extremely gentle, but for some unknown reason, it gave off a feeling of hundreds and thousands of twists and turns. She said, "I know. I will atone for my sister in front of Buddha." Now every sentence that Shin Miao said seemed to have other meanings and Ren Yun could not help but have a layer of goosebumps. She didn't know what to say, so she covered her face and sobbed again. All right. Old Shinfuren was also rather impatient. Today she did not manage to grasp Shin Miao and it made her heart feel like it was blocked by a stone. Looking at Ren Yun's crying appearance, her heart was even more vexed. He then said, "Lao bring your wife out. Rong Jing Tang is crying all day, what is he doing? All of you, get out. Fifth girl, go to the ancestral hall and kneel now. Don't eat today." Everyone took their leave and Shin Miao did not haggle over the matter too much. After leaving Rong Jing Tang, she headed towards the western courtyard. But she did not know that behind her, everyone's eyes were on her. Shin Wan said solemnly, "Fifth mother has really grown up." "Yes." Chen Rochio's lips hooked up, this time fifth mother is really an eye-opener. "Mother." Shin Yu spoke softly, "Fifth younger sister is somewhat scary." Her unperturbed expression in Wulong Temple made Shin Qing suffer such a loss and still able to escape unscathed. Even Shin Yu felt a trace of fear. She did not know when that good-to-talk and stupid Tang younger sister had such ability. Chapter 103. What is you are afraid of? Shin Wan caressed Shin Yu's head. It was clearly a loving expression, but the words that came out were gloomy, just a little girl who does not know the immensity of heaven and earth. Sooner or later she will pay the price. Shin Miao really entered the Shin family's ancestral hall as old Shinfuren had arranged. The Shin family was a military family, and the ancestral hall was dedicated to their ancestors. These ancestors had laid down such a prosperous family business for the Shin family on horseback. Unfortunately, in this generation, the Shin family was also united in appearance, but divided in heart, and was not far from decline. Old General Shin's branch was initially very prosperous. Unfortunately, in a war, the few brothers of the Shin family were all killed in battle and only old General Shin managed to escape alive. Old General Shin gave birth to 3 sons, but only one of them took the path of a military general. Now on the surface the Shin residence still inherited its original glory, but other than that formidable great general Shin Xian, it was an out-and-out scholarly family, which was quite ironic. Is young lady numb from kneeling? Guyu asked. Jing Zhe and Guyu also followed into the ancestral hall. Shin Miao was worried that Ren Wan Yun would do something behind her back. Previously in Wulong Temple, she had deliberately sent Jing Zhe and Guyu away so that both of them could escape the fate of being silenced. But in the huge Shin residence, everyone had their own ulterior motives, so it was better to leave it by one's side. Ren Wan Yun's hands were too long and would not dare to make a move in front of her. Even if it is not numb, the humidity in this place is heavy. Jing Zhe looked at the little window grumpily. Now it is raining and the ground is wet. Kneeling like this will cause the root of the illness. Moreover, they are simply being unreasonable. What does this matter have to do with young lady? The guilty ones are the first to complain. When master returns, see if they still dare to speak less. Guyu reprimanded. If it is discovered by others, the one to suffer would be young lady. Shin Miao smiled and did not care. Jing Zhe thought about it and asked again, but today was considered unexpected. So many of them went to Rong Jing Tang, but there was not a single person by young lady's side and came out unscathed. Even though kneeling in the ancestral hall is terrible, it is much better than what this servant thought. Before entering Rong Jing Tang to denounce, Shin Miao did not bring her maids in. Thus Shin Miao's maids did not know what was happening inside. Young lady must have convinced the entire house of people, Guyu said with admiration, not afraid even when facing so many people. Young lady is now more and more like master's demeanor. So many people. Shin Miao could not help but laugh in her heart. It was just a small Shin residence and just a bunch of clowns that could not be seen in public. At the beginning when Fu Xiuyi wanted to change the crown prince, all the officials stood on the side of Mei Furen and Fu Sheng. Her Fu Ming was almost under house arrest at that time and she wore the Empress court dress and faced the officials in the throne room, arguing with them, and every word she said was filled with tears of blood. How weak was the power of one person! She was the noblest woman in the world, and she had married the noblest man in the world, but she couldn't even protect what her son deserved. No one stood beside her, and she could not retreat, because there were people to protect. It was precisely because she had failed to protect the precious person that she was using even more violent methods this time. Cruel. Heartless. Hypocrisy. Cunning. It did not matter. As long as the tip of the blade was aimed at the enemy, as long as the enemy was the one who fell, even if the process was more cruel, she alone would block the sin, so what? She closed her eyes and the ancestral tablets were in front of her. Shin Miao softly said, "The ancestors on horseback, if your spirits are still alive, please bestow me the sharpest arrows and the fastest horses. Please bless me to kill my enemies with my own hands." Chapter 104. When she finished reading, she opened her eyes and saw Jing Zhe looking at her with blinking eyes. She took out a packet of snacks from her bosom and smiled. "Young lady has been hungry for so long, it is not good to not eat something. This servant still has some snacks that young lady can fill your stomach with." Shin Miao would not really fast just because of old Shin Furen's orders. She took the paper bag and opened it to take a look and could not help but be surprised. This is what this servant found in young lady's room in Wulong Temple. Jing Zhe scratched her head and said embarrassedly, "At that time young lady bestowed the snacks to this servant, and after this servant tasted one piece, this servant had never eaten such delicious snacks before and could not bear to finish it." After returning to the residence and young lady went to the ancestral hall, one did not have time to take food from outside and only these were left. Shin Miao looked at the exquisite snacks that were left behind when Xie Jingxing talked with her at night. Thinking of this, it was as if she could see that youth's handsome face in the rain and that mysterious identity. Xie Jingxing. Shin Miao muttered to herself, what kind of person was he? In Kai Yun Yuan. The physician had just left and Shin Qing, who had drunk the tranquilizer, had already fallen asleep. Even after seeing it several times, Ren Wanyun could not help but feel as if a knife was twisting in her heart every time she saw the scars on Shinqing's body. That physician was one of their own, so naturally he would not say it out, and he also clearly told Ren Wanyun that Shinqing's injuries were too serious and her mind was not clear, so one would need to recuperate for a few days. As for why she was not conscious, naturally it was because she was scared to this state. Ren Wanyun dared not think about what kind of torture Shinqing had suffered that night. That night she stayed next to Shinqing and even heard Shinqing's cry for help, but she thought that it was Shin Miao and did not move forward. In the end, her daughter was defiled. Just thinking of these, Ren Wanyun's heart and intestines would move. Shen Gui glanced at Shinqing, who was lying on the bed and seemed to feel a headache before turning to leave. "Stop!" Ren Wanyun called out to him, "Qing'er has now become like this. Do you still want to go to those vixens' courtyard?" Shen Gui was lustful and had several concubines in the room, each of them were beautiful and gentle. Ren Wanyun was powerful and managed to tame these concubines. Even though Shen Gui was lustful, he knew that only Ren Wanyun could make his official path smoother and things would not happen, so Ren Wanyun was too lazy to care about him. Men were all the same. A concubine was just a plaything, so why should she bother with a plaything? But today, she was behaving strangely. "Can you not be so unreasonable?" Shen Gui was somewhat irritated. Today he was rendered speechless by his own niece and he did not know what would happen on Prince Yu's side in the future. Would he vent his anger on him? Thinking of these, Shen Gui was extremely vexed, and at this time when he saw Shinqing, it added fuel to the fire. His tone was a little impatient. "It's useless for me to stay here. Why don't you let me have some peace and think about what to do next?" Think. Ren Wanyun changed from her usual character of looking at the big picture and screamed, "You only know how to think. What is Qing'er in your eyes? She has now become like this, but you as a father are indifferent and do not care about anything. In your heart, one fear that there is no Qing'er, this daughter. How can there be such a vicious father like you in this world?" When the words were spoken, Ren Wanyun's two personal maids, Xiang Lan and Kai Ju, were stunned. Normally Ren Wanyun was able to remain calm and composed. Even if something happened to Shinqing in Wulong Temple, she would still be able to hold on and focus on the big picture. As for Shen Gui, she had never said any harsh words. For such a rational and slick person like Ren Wanyun to quarrel with Shen Gui like a shrew, it was really unbelievable. Chapter 105. Ren Wanyun also did not know why she was like this. Seeing Shen Gui's appearance, the words that Shen Miao said in Rongjing Tang previously echoed in her ears. When Shen Gui knew that something happened to Shinqing, the first thing that he thought of was not to check on Shinqing's injuries but to discipline Shen Miao. This was not what a real father would do. Shen Gui did not care about this daughter's life or death. Perhaps to Shen Gui, Shinqing was just a valuable object. In the past, because of its value, he was willing to raise it, but now that there was no value, he was not even willing to take a look at it. Shen Miao's provocation had little effect in Rongjing Tang, but after accumulating till now, it exploded. "You vixen!" Shen Gui was now often flattered in the officialdom, and when would there be a time where he was pointed at and scolded? Even though he was angry in his heart, he knew that he could not completely fall out with Ren Wanyun, so he sneered, "You say that I am not a good father, but have you ever been a good mother? It was you who brought Qing'er to Wulong Temple and should be taken care of by you. You were right by her side, but you let something happen to her right under your nose. Did you not sleep next to her that night? If you really love her, how could you not discover that Qing'er was the one who had an accident at such a short distance?" When the words were said, Ren Wanyun was immediately stunned. What she regretted the most and hated the most was that night in the northern pavilion. She obviously heard the cries for help and had the chance to save her daughter, but by a freak combination of factors, Shinqing had an accident. Now Shen Gui was stabbing a knife into her heart and sprinkling salt on the wound, causing her to stand rooted to the ground. When Shingue saw that she did not speak, he coldly snorted and flicked his sleeves and left, not knowing which concubine's courtyard he went to. Ren Wanyun stood there blankly for a moment before her legs softened and she collapsed to the ground. She covered her face and cried softly. Xiang Lan and Kai Ju were afraid and shocked as they had never seen their mistress like this. The current Ren Wanyun was as if all her support had collapsed in one night and she was utterly defeated. There was no longer any trace of the previous flush of success. The two maids could only go forward to comfort her. One did not know how long she cried before Ren Wanyun wiped her eyes and stood up again. She said, "Bring a brush and paper. I want to write a letter to Yuan." Shen Yuan was the eldest son of the second household, Ren Wanyun's eldest son. Currently he was in the Lu province and once his term was up, he would return to the capital to be an official in the Ding capital. If one were to say that in the third household, Shen Yu was the proudest, then in the second household, Shen Yuan Bo was young and Shen Qing's aptitude was not good, but this Shen Yuan was blessed by the heavens. At such a young age, he was able to obtain scholarly honors and did things well. Shen Gue would be a good job. Father is unreliable but there is always Shen. Ren Wanyun glanced at Shen Qing who was sleeping on the bed and gritted her teeth. Yuan loves you the most, this younger sister. Shen meowed, that little slut, this time I will make you regret your actions for the rest of your life. Not said. Xiang Lan quickly ran and Ren Qing to Ju. Wanyun Xian Shen Qing, Shen Yuan was, Shen Qing Shen Qing Qing, Huan Mama, Qing, Shi Shen Qing Mu, Shen, Gue, Qing, Wan Chang Mo Shen of Wanyun Shen Yuan, Gue, Shen, Wan Fu is Shen Yuan, Shen. These maids were naturally the ones who had witnessed Shen Qing's mishap at that time. There were Shen Qing's maids Yan Mei and Shui Bai, Shen Yu's maids Qing Wan and Huang Ying, and there was also Gue Momo. Shen Yu's maid was fed with mute medicine and returned to Qiu Shui Yuan. Chen Ro Qiu can decide how to deal with it. Qing's two maids. Ren Wanyun said fiercely, sell them to a 9th-rank brothel. If they die like this, wouldn't it be letting the two of them off for nothing? Not being able to protect your master is an unforgivable crime. Chapter 106. Kai Ju could not help but shudder. The brothel and the brothel were not the same. The ladies in the brothel could choose to sell their skills or their bodies, but the ladies in the brothel were all in the flesh business. The 9th-class brothels were the lowest class among all the brothels. The people who worked there received the most rude and inferior people. Because they worked as laborers, those people naturally couldn't be said to have tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex. Some of them were even extremely rough. And the ladies could not stop receiving guests all day long. From morning to night, the money that they received would not belong to them and would be directly handed over to their mother. If one day they got venereal disease, they would not even be able to take medicine. They would find a mat and throw it out. It was very common for them to freeze to death, starve to death or be bitten to death by dogs. So generally, the people who were sold to the 9th-ranked brothel were either servants who had committed heinous crimes or had enmity with the master. But Yan Mei and Shui Bai had been by Shen Qing's side since they were young and had worked hard for so many years. Who knew that they would end up like this? This servant will save it. Then Gue Momo. Kai Ju asked tentatively. Gue Momo had long pledged her loyalty to them, so she could be considered as Kai Yun Yuan's people. Gue Momo. Ren Wanyun lowered her head and sneered, I do not know what happened that night. Now that I think about it, I have to meet Gue Momo. After all, she is the one who knows the ins and outs of the matter. In the abandoned woodshed, there was a smell of decay everywhere. Because it had been raining for a few days, there was even green moss growing on the ground. If it was a normal day, it would appear quiet, but in the darkness here, it seemed somewhat strange. This woodshed had locked up countless people. Those people were all people who had committed mistakes in the Shin residence. There were masters and servants. These people did not have a good ending, and the common point was that after being locked up here for a while, they would quietly disappear from the Shin residence, as if they had never appeared in this world. At this moment in the woodshed, there were some strange sounds. It seemed that someone was struggling and kicked something, and there were also suppressed cries. The lantern was casually placed to the side, illuminating the woodshed. Under the dim yellow light, the woodshed seemed even more eerie. Two tall old maids were grabbing the necks of two maids and pouring the contents of the bottles into the mouths of the maids. The two maids kept struggling, but their thin bodies were like chicks in the hands of the old maid, and their chins were blocked so that they could not spit out the things in their mouths. After a long time, the two maids finally stopped struggling and covered their necks with painful expressions. "Drag them out." The old maid ordered the manservant behind her. Two manservants came in and dragged the two girls out. "These two." The old maid pointed at the other two maids, "Drag them out too. But madam has specially told us to take good care of them. They will be sold to that place anyway. If you want, you can do whatever you want." When the two servants heard this, they revealed looks of desire. When they looked at the two maids again, there was only despair left on their faces. Seeing that they were almost done, the two old maids got up and were about to go out. "Madam, did madam say what I should do?" A figure suddenly jumped out from the dark corner and hugged the leg of one of the old maids. What should this old servant do? That person was none other than Gue Momo. "Momo, do not be anxious." That old maid pulled Gue Momo's hand away from her leg and said in a strange tone, "Since madam values Momo so much, she must have made plans for Momo. Just wait and see." After that, he left without looking back. The room was suddenly plunged into darkness again. Gue Momo shrank in the corner with an expression of extreme fear. No one was willing to die and she wanted to live. Chapter 107. In the gloomy woodshed, there were occasional sounds of mice crawling in the darkness, as if they were gnawing on the firewood. Coupled with the movements in the night, it made one's heart feel cold. Gue Momo was alone in the corner. Even though she was only a Momo for so many years, but because she had face in front of Shin Miao, the second and third household were willing to give her some face, so she was considered to be doing well in the Shin residence. Sometimes Gue Momo's life was more comfortable than those commoners and wealthy families. It was easy to go from frugality to extravagance, but difficult to go from extravagance to frugality. She was not used to hard days, not to mention being locked up in the woodshed like those lowly maids. Her thin clothes were unable to withstand the cold of the night, but what was colder than her body was her heart. Gue Momo's heart was very fearful of the four maids that were locked up together. Shin Yu's maids were given mute drugs, and one did not know if they could survive. Shin Qing's maids were directly sold to a 9th-rank brothel. Ren Wanyun's methods were so ruthless that she could not help but worry about her own fate. Gue Momo did not think that Ren Wanyun would let her off easily. Because she not only witnessed Shin Qing's scandal, but also played an important role in this matter. The one who should have been harmed was Shin Miao, but in the end it was Shin Qing who was defiled. How would Ren Wanyun let her off so easily? Duh. Just as she was thinking, there was a sudden sound of footsteps coming from outside, and it was especially clear in the night. Gue Momo's body stiffened, and in the darkness, she looked fearfully at the direction of the door. It seemed to be hope and also despair. What was behind the door? Was it the person that Ren Wanyun sent to silence her? Or perhaps she still had a trace of life. The footsteps were not fast nor slow, but it was like a death warrant that struck Gue Momo's heart. Her plump body had long turned into a pile of mud, and her forehead was sweating profusely, and her body seemed to be swaying. Jiya, the door was pushed open. The person who came was carrying a green lantern. The color of the lantern was somewhat strange, and in this place, it was like a demon demanding for one's life. Gue Momo tremblingly raised her head and saw a person in a white cloak standing at the door. She walked in and slowly closed the door. There was only the green lantern in the room, emitting a ghostly light. The person who came finally loosened her cloak, revealing a delicate and fair face. It was Shin Miao. The young girl's figure was slender, and her round and gentle facial features were illuminated by the green light, making her look even more strange. It was precisely because of the carefree expression on his face that made him seem even more like a soul-reaping emissary who had walked out of hell, causing people to actually not dare to look directly at him. Gue Momo was stunned for a moment before suddenly calling out in surprise, "Young lady." Shin Miao placed the lantern on the ground and walked unhurriedly to Gue Momo before squatting down and smiled gently. "Is Momo all right?" "Miss, you're here." This old servant knew that Miss would definitely come to save this old servant. Miss has always been kind-hearted and will definitely not sit idly by and ignore this old servant. It was as if Gue Momo had grabbed onto a life-saving straw as she desperately grabbed onto the corner of Shin Miao's skirt. Tears flowed down her aged face as if she had suffered 120 grievances and Shin Miao was her most trusted relative. Shin Miao swept a glance at Gue Momo's hand that was tightly grabbing onto the corner of her skirt and smiled gently. It seems that Gue Momo had suffered a lot of hardships here. Gue Momo was startled for a moment before carefully looking at Shin Miao's expression. Shin Miao's smile was gentle and her appearance was considered calm, but there was no ripple at all in the face of Gue Momo's words. Gue Momo was shocked to discover that this young lady whom she had accompanied for so many years, could not see what Shin Miao was thinking at all. She said, "This old servant has served young lady all my life and is loyal to young lady." On that day in Wulong Temple, this old servant accidentally saw it. "Young lady, this old servant is innocent." Chapter 108. It seems that Gue Momo really see me as a hope. Shin Miao said worriedly, "But how can I save you? In this residence, will anyone listen to my words? What ability do I have to reject the Eastern Courtyard's orders?" "No, young lady will definitely have a way." Gue Momo became anxious when she heard it. Even though she knew that what Shin Miao said was reasonable, in the entire Shin residence, the second and third household only had a good relationship with the first household on the surface. Shin Xian and wife were not in the Ding capital all year round, so it was impossible for Shin Miao to be of any use by herself. But everyone had a desire to live and Gue Momo could only grab hold of Shin Miao, so she was not willing to give up. She said, "Young lady can go and beg old Furin. If it is really not possible, young lady can write a letter to master and let master reply to the residents. They will not disobey master's words." Seemingly feeling that she had found an excellent way, Gue Momo's eyes lit up and looked at Shin Miao with hope. But she saw Shin Miao chuckling softly and shaking her head. Looking at her, she slowly said, "Father's words can indeed save you, but on what basis?" Gue Momo was stunned. "On what basis do I have to spend so much effort running around here and there for a servant?" Her voice seemed to contain a touch of ridicule, and under the sparkling lights, it was as if she did not put the person in front of her in her eyes at all. Gue Momo suddenly panicked. She did not expect that Shin Miao would actually say such words. She watched Shin Miao grow up, and the reason why she was cold to her in the past few days was because of a child's temper. Gue Momo knew that Shin Miao was soft-hearted, and that day in Wulong Temple, she even had a heart-to-heart talk with her. It was obvious that she wanted to put her in an important position again. Why did she change her face now? Could it be that someone said something in front of Shin Miao? Gue Momo's heart moved. It must be those two maids, Gu Yu and Jingzhe, who said it. They had always liked to go against her, and now that she was in prison, those two maids would definitely hit her when she was down and say something in front of Shin Miao. She panicked and said, "Miss, I've been with you for so long. I've watched you grow up since you were born. It's been so many years, but master and madam are often not around. It's only me and you who depend on each other." Speaking up to this point, she even choked a little as if she was extremely sad. "Miss, you also said that you had a fever at night, but the doctor didn't come for a long time. I braved the rain to find a doctor for you, and because of that, I fell ill. His every word was recounting the friendship of the past. As Gue Momo spoke, her eyes glanced at Shin Miao. The people of the first household of the Shin family, no matter if it was Shin Xian and wife or the Shin siblings, they were all extremely grateful. Perhaps this was the inheritance of a military family, to know how to repay kindness. Now Gue Momo was also using kindness to seek repayment, hoping that it would move Shin Miao. However, in the light, the girl lowered her head and smiled faintly. She did not look moved at all, as if she was listening to an interesting story. She softly said, Gue Momo originally treated me well. Then how do I, the first household of the Shin family, treat Gue Momo? Gue Momo hesitated for a moment but still said, Furin and master treated this old servant very well and young lady also treated this old servant very well. Both inside and outside gave this old servant enough face and the monthly allowance was also very generous. Towards this old servant was not scolded at all. Not only that. Shin Miao continued her words, your son, your grandson. Whatever that can be helped, I have helped. In the entire western courtyard, you are the biggest. I did not treat you as my own Momo but treated you as a relative. I trust you, get close to you and think of you in everything. Do you not agree? Yes. Gue Momo said. Indeed, because Shin Miao was young and easy to coax, she was able to coax Shin Miao until she was obedient. Whatever she said, Shin Miao would believe it. In the western courtyard, she could almost be considered as half a master. Chapter 109. Then why did you betray me when I treated you so well? A light sentence almost made Gue Momo, who was immersed in her memories, to be scared out of her wits. She looked up at Shin Miao and said in shock, What? Momo need not show such a shocked expression. Shin Miao smiled, at the beginning when I knew that Momo had the heart to betray one's mistress, I was 1,000 times, 10,000 times more surprised than Momo. Young lady, there must be someone instigating. This old servant had never betrayed young lady before. How could this old servant betray young lady? Young lady must believe this old servant. Gue Momo's reaction was very fast and after a short moment of panic, she put on an extremely wronged look and shouted the injustice louder than the heavens, trying to prove her loyalty. Enough. Shin Miao waved her hands and there was a little impatience on her face. In Wulong Temple, there is aphrodisiac incense in the vegetarian food. Second Shin's methods have always been brilliant. To invite Momo to do things, she really treated Momo as her confidant. She said it word by word and when she reached the last word, Gue Momo, who wanted to defend herself from the start, was unable to say a single word. She looked at Shin Miao blankly with an inexplicable horror in her eyes. Momo most likely is illiterate and do not know that there is a phrase called the mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Momo is also a person who had served 2 masters before. I also want to hear, in Momo's eyes, is Second Shin's methods more brilliant or am I better? Could it be that you? Gue Momo spat out a few words with difficulty. Not bad. It is me. Shin Miao's voice was very low, so low that only Gue Momo could hear it. She said, the person who should be defiled was me. Why did it become eldest sister at the end? Naturally it was not a coincidence. It was all done by me. Guessing it was one thing and hearing it with one's own ears was another. Gue Momo looked at the young female in front of her in fear. She was half squatting on the ground and looking at herself with a smile. That clear eyes were like the eyes of a wild beast under the jade-green light. It was extraordinarily bright in the dark and also extraordinarily frightening. It was clearly a well-behaved and tender appearance, so how could it be so scary? Regarding Shin Miao and Shin Qing's change in person, Gue Momo had been thinking about this after being thrown into the woodshed. She also guessed that it could be Shin Miao's actions but she quickly dispelled this absurd thought. She had watched Shin Miao grow up and Gue Momo was very familiar with her capabilities. She was originally and soft-hearted and she would not be able to do it. Now Shin Miao had personally admitted it in front of her and did not even try to cover it up. If it was someone else, Gue Momo would feel that this person was too arrogant and stupid, but now she no longer dared to look at Shin Miao with an ordinary gaze. Miss. She opened her mouth but didn't know what to say. Shin. She did not know what. Momo of Ren Gue. Gue Shin. And Shen, of and was Shen of Mo of Shen was that she was Shen of Gue Momo was fearful of Ren Wanyun's methods and Shin Miao's words ignited the hope in her heart. She knelt on the ground and kept kowtowing to Shin Miao, young lady save this old servant this time. This old servant did not mean to harm young lady. Second Furin used this old servant's grandchildren to threaten this old servant and this old servant was forced. Young lady look at master and Furin sake and this old servant had served young lady for more than 10 years. Please save this old servant. She knocked her head on the ground. If it was in the past, with Shin Miao's respect for her, she would not let Gue Momo bend her back like this. But now, she was the Empress Shin of Ming Qi and all the civil and military officials had knelt before her. She could really afford to be a servant who betrayed her master. Chapter 110. Actually the reason why I came here tonight is to repay Gue Momo's kindness for so many years. Shin Miao suddenly said. When Gue Momo heard it, she was overjoyed and said loudly, this old servant knew that young lady is a kind person and is so sentimental and righteous. In the future Bodhisattva will bless young lady with a smooth life and those who want to harm young lady will all die a horrible death. Shin Miao could not help but laugh in her heart. Gue Momo's fence-sitter was really amazing. She also raised her voice, actually it is not only to repay these. That day in Wulong Temple, didn't Gue Momo open her heart to me? From then on, I knew that in this world, Gue Momo would really treat me well. Gue Momo was somewhat at a loss as she did not know what Shin Miao meant by saying all these. Just now she obviously hated her so much, but why was she comforting in a turn of the head? No matter what, Gue Momo felt that she was full of hope and immediately replied to Shin Miao's words, yes, this old servant is standing on young lady's side from the beginning to the end. Only young lady is this old servant's master and this old servant will definitely be loyal to young lady for a lifetime. Suddenly a strange sound was heard from outside the window as if something had been hit. Gue Momo jumped in shock and immediately looked outside, but how could she see anything in the dark room? She could not see anything and turned her head to look at Shin Miao with a miserable expression. Can young lady get this old servant out now? It is too dark and humid here. This old servant's arms and legs will not be able to support for long. Do not be afraid. You do not need to support for long. Anyway, you are going to die soon. What? Gue Momo suddenly raised her head and looked at Shin Miao in a daze. This old servant does not understand young lady's meaning. Just now the people outside were sent by Second Shen and it seems that they have already discovered that I am here to visit Gue Momo. Shin Miao smiled, as such, what path does Gue Momo have to live? This old servant does not understand. Gue Momo subconsciously straightened her body. She felt a faint uneasiness in her heart but did not know what Shin Miao meant. Do not understand? Shin Miao tilted her head and pondered for a moment. Do you still remember what Momo said loudly just now? When Gue Momo heard it, she really thought about it and her expression changed and instantly turned pale. She had just said loudly, from the beginning to the end, I stood on Shin Miao's side and only Shin Miao was her master. Admittedly, these words were said to deceive Shin Miao and to express her loyalty, hoping that Shin Miao would be able to save her. But if Ren Wanyun's people heard this, what would they think? That day when Shin Qing inexplicably changed positions with Shin Miao, she already suspected that Shin Miao had done something to it. The reason why she did not dare to believe it was because she did not know how Shin Miao could predict the future. But what if Gue Momo told this matter to Shin Miao and conspired with Shin Miao to scheme against Shin Qing? Everything made sense. This was not the truth, but in Ren Yun's ears, this was the truth. Before there was time to be afraid, Shin Miao had already opened her mouth again and said softly, "I want to repay Momo with this big gift. Does Momo feel that it is good?" Gue Momo stared at Shin Miao. She only discovered at this time that she was led by the nose by Shin Miao from the beginning to the end. Whatever Shin Miao said, she would believe it, and the relationship between her and Shin Miao had already changed. But Shin Miao was more unpredictable than her and would turn hostile anytime, and she could not guess what was Shin Miao's motive at all. "I only have one purpose, and that is to send Momo on your way." Seeming to have guessed the doubts in Gue Momo's heart, Shin Miao said with a smile. Gue Momo's body trembled. She wanted to cry and scream, but she could not make any sound at all. She did not know when that infant in swaddling clothes had become a real young female, and no one had ever discovered the other side of this young female, and even she did not understand it. She wanted to resist fiercely and wanted to curse, but when she met that pair of beast-like eyes, she could not help but tremble. Chapter 111. My Shin family does not raise treacherous people. Even if Momo reaches the Yellow Springs Road and turns into a malicious spirit to seek revenge on me, I will not be afraid and perhaps fight with Momo again. Her words were colder than her smile. It is not that I have betrayed Momo, but Momo betrayed me. It is a pity for Momo's grandson and son. Second Shen has always been ruthless, and perhaps Momo will be reunited with them soon. No. Gue Momo's body trembled and her tears and snot had already flowed together as she cried pitifully, "I beg you, save them. I have already said that a servant who betrays their master is not worthy of my concern." Shin Miao's words were cruel and cold. "Watching from the sidelines is my greatest kindness." She slowly leaned forward as if she was whispering to Gue Momo when she was young, and lightly said, "Because of the 10 over years of master and servant relationship, I came to see Gue Momo for the last time. Gue Momo, have a safe journey." A moving smile bloomed on her bright and clean little face. It was originally a cute and delicate little face, but it was so cruel that it made one's heart palpitate. Gue Momo still wanted to say something, but she saw Shin Miao standing up and putting on her cloak again. The corner of the cloak drew a pale white light in the darkness, as if the white paper money was fluttering on the coffin. That jade lantern was carried out of the room, and the moment the door was closed, everything fell back into darkness and despair flooded in from all directions. Outside, when Bai Lu and Shuang Jiang saw Shin Miao coming out, they then sighed in relief and supported Shin Miao to leave. After they left, a female figure appeared in the flowering shrubs and looked at Shin Miao's back view before looking at the tightly closed door of the woodshed, revealing a look of resentment. After a few rounds of autumn rain, the sky finally cleared up. Everything in the general residence seemed to have returned to its usual calmness, but the medicinal fragrance that came out from the eastern courtyard from time to time reminded the Shin residents of the turmoil that happened in the past few days. Shin Qing's consciousness seemed to be gradually recovering, and at least was not as crazy as before when she saw people. It was just that Ren Yun was afraid that she would be stimulated again, so these days she had been locked up in Kai Yun Yuan and did not allow her to come out. She was even more afraid that Shin Qing would commit suicide, so she was always guarding her. As such, all the matters in the residence were handed over to Chen Roqiu to manage. Ren Yun rarely left the courtyard, and it gave Shin Miao a rare few days of peace. However, this did not mean that nothing had happened. A few days later, Gue Momo was finally executed by someone. He was charged with colluding with criminals and plotting to murder Shin Qing. Now in the Shin residence, there was no one who brought up Shin Qing's matter in front of Shin Miao. It was not because the matter had been settled, but because of Shin Miao's words in Rong Jing Tang that day. It made these people refrain from shooting at the rat for fear of breaking the vases, and did not dare to easily take action. He did not dare to touch Shin Miao, but he still dared to touch Gue Momo, the wet nurse by Shin Miao's side. According to the residence's laws, Gue Momo would be beaten to death with a rod. Generally speaking, servants who committed crimes would be executed. The bigger ones would be beaten to death with a rod and the more ordinary ones would be downed with a bottle of medicine. In short, the slave contract was in the hands of the master, and no one cared whether he lived or died. But Momo's death was really miserable as her 4 limbs seemed to be broken by someone. There was not an inch of good bones in her entire body and her 7 orifices were bleeding, looking extremely horrifying. Even the manservant who carried the corpse did not dare to look at the corpse's appearance, but Ren Wanyun still called Shin Miao to collect the corpse. Ren Wanyun's maid, Xiang Lan, came over and said, Furen said that even though Momo committed a mistake and was executed, but she was after all 5th young lady's servant. So 5th young lady would still need to arrange for the matter of collecting the corpse, thus Momo's corpse was placed in the western courtyard. 5th young lady, quickly go and take a look. Chapter 112. Most likely everyone wanted to see Shin Miao's panicked look. After all, the servants in the Shin residence knew that Momo was Shin Miao's trusted aide. Now that she ended up with a tragic death, one feared that Shin Miao would be heartbroken. Most likely Ren Wanyun also thought so, thinking that Shin Miao would blame herself for Momo's death. Who knew that on that day, in front of everyone in the western courtyard, Shin Miao walked to Momo's corpse and lifted the white cloth. Her expression did not change as she looked at the miserable corpse without even wrinkling her brows. Xiang Lan was surprised at Shin Miao's calmness but saw Shin Miao coldly scolding. Momo was tyrannical in the western courtyard in the past, deceiving the superiors and the subordinates, a big servant bullying the master, arrogant and despotic. This kind of servant, even if she did not commit any mistakes, the western courtyard would not accept her. Today all of you will see clearly for me that in the future those who learn from Momo's actions will all end up like this. Most of the western courtyard were planted by the 2nd and 3rd household spies, and in the past they saw Momo dominating the place. Now that Momo had died tragically and Shin Miao was actually so cold, fear involuntarily rose in their hearts. When Xiang Lan saw this scene, she knew that it was not good. She originally wanted to scare Shin Miao, but who knew that Shin Miao used Momo's death to establish her prestige. She immediately returned to Kai Yun Yuan to report the matter to Ren Wanyun. Bad. Fallen into a trap. When Ren Wanyun heard the matter, her hands loosened and the teacup fell onto the ground, breaking into pieces. Furen. Kai Ju was somewhat puzzled. Ren Wanyun gritted her teeth. Momo was originally a raft. One think that little slut had long wanted to get rid of Momo but borrowed our hands. Now she even established her prestige in the western courtyard. Little slut, her calculations are really shrewd. Ren Wanyun was not stupid, but on Shin Qing's matter, as a mother, she inevitably lost her usual calmness. That night, the people who went to look for Momo saw Shin Miao going to look for Momo and heard some words. Momo seemed to be loyal to Shin Miao. When they returned and told Ren Wanyun about it, Ren Wanyun was certain that Shin Qing's accident was because Momo and Shin Miao conspired to change the person. With such thoughts in his heart, the hatred towards Shin Miao and Momo was like a torrential flood. Shin Miao temporarily could not be moved, but Momo, a servant, could be moved. Thus she used the cruelest method to torture Momo to death. She originally thought that Shin Miao would definitely be sad when she saw Momo die. But after hearing Xiang Lan's words, Ren Wanyun knew that she was being played by Shin Miao. Everything was set up by Shin Miao. Using a borrowed knife to kill, Shin Miao played it better than anyone else. Ren Wanyun's teeth itched with hatred. She had had a smooth sailing life in the inner residence for so many years, and all of Shin Gui's concubines were all subdued by her, but now they were repeatedly defeated in the hands of a silly little girl. Ren Wanyun's heart was filled with rage. Did you bring the letter for Prince Yu? Ren Wanyun asked. Yes, but madam, if master knew about it, he would definitely be angry. Kai Ju carefully replied. Now with Shin Qing's matter, Shen Gui tried every possible way to hide it from Prince Yu for a while, hoping that Prince Yu would not discover it. But Ren Wanyun could not wait for Prince Yu to discover it immediately because with Prince Yu's temperament, if someone dared to play tricks under his eyelids, that person would definitely die a horrible death. Even if she quarreled with Shen Gui, she would take revenge for Shen Qing. Since Shen Miao dared to threaten the entire Shen family, then did she dare to threaten Prince Yu? I want her to die without a burial ground. Ren Wanyun gritted her teeth. Young lady is playing chess again. Bai Lu shook her head and was somewhat puzzled. What is the meaning of playing chess alone? Chapter 113. What else can one do other than play chess? Shuang Jiang looked at the person at the table and said angrily, being grounded all day and not even able to leave the courtyard. If this goes on, one would not be able to do anything in the day. Shu Bai Lu said softly, do not say any more. Young lady is not happy being grounded, so do not mention it and make her angry. Shuang Jiang mumbled, our young lady has a good temperament and would not get angry. Speaking of which, it had been a long time since one saw Shen Miao angry. Not to mention anger, there was no obvious emotion at all. Even though the previous Shen Miao was an idiot, her emotions were clear. If she was happy, and if she was sad, she was sad. But now, the few personal maids could not understand her. If one said that one's growth was slow, then Shen Miao's change seemed to be completed overnight. No one knew how she changed from a simple and cowardly person to a plain and emotionless person. Bai Lu. Just as she was speaking, she heard Shen Miao calling her name and Bai Lu quickly went forward to answer. Find a time to pawn the gold jewelry in the silver jewelry box in the cabinet. She said without turning her head back. Yes. Bai Lu quickly replied and was surprised. But young lady, yesterday one box of jewelry was pawned and this is the last box. No harm. Shen Miao put down the chess piece, after all there is no use for it. After pawning it, pass the banknotes to Jing Zhe and call Gu Yuan. Bai Lu complied and went out, but there were some doubts in her heart. Shen Miao was anxious to pawn jewelry, but it seemed that she was anxious to use the money. One did not know what the money was used for. Kuai Huo Lu was the biggest restaurant in the Ding capital and it was located in the heart of the bustling area. Opposite Kuai Huo Lu was a brothel. After the high officials and noble people had banquets at Kuai Huo Lu, most of them would go to the opposite brothel to seek pleasure. And the brothel was divided into a few grades. The more brilliant it was, the higher it was on the upper floors. The people at the top floor were those courtesans who only sold their skills but not their bodies. Below that were some famous young ladies and the lowest were the 9th grade brothels. This kind of brothels did not have the qualifications to be called lu or courtyard and could only be called ban or lower quarters. San Fu Ban was opposite Kuai Huo Lu and was the lowest grade brothel. Most of the people who came in and out were lowly laborers, and there were often people who threw sick and dying girls into the streets. The street beggars would carry these girls back, perhaps to vent their anger, or perhaps because their clothes could be sold for a copper coin. As compared to the exquisiteness of Kuai Huo Lu, the opposite San Fu Ban was simply hell on earth. At the window of Kuai Huo Lu, the young male's white sleeves were spotless as he frowned as he looked at the San Fu Ban opposite. He saw that someone had thrown the new maids in and the maids were struggling and crying non-stop. Most likely it was some master who had sent the servants over. Some young maids were beautiful and jealous matriarchs would sell them to San Fu Ban to prevent them from climbing onto the bed. How cruel. The white-robed young master shook his head. Although his tone was one of pity, he had no intention of going down to help. And the young gentleman opposite him was dressed in purple with a threatening noble air. He only poured the wine and lightly said, the person had already entered Prince Yu residence. It is still unknown whether one can find him or not. What if one cannot find him? The white-robed young master turned his head to look at him. Continue to search. The purple-clad youth's lips hooked up into a smile. That evil smile was exceptionally handsome, making the courtesan who was playing the instrument at the side absent-minded and played a wrong note. When the white-robed young master saw this, he smiled mischievously. Third Xia, your charm is getting bigger. Even beautiful women favor you. How do you want me to live? He made a long sigh. In fact, this white-robed young master was also very handsome, but compared to the purple-clad youth, he lacked that lazy noble air. That youth's expression was lazy, but his pair of eyes were very sharp, like the scorching sun in the sky, naturally dazzling and eye-catching. Standing beside him, the light was naturally covered up. Gao Yang, if you like, later I will bestow you a room. Xie Jingxing glanced at him. Never mind. The white-robed young master quickly waved his hands and smiled bitterly. Beauties can be seen from afar and not played with. I do not have that much energy. But you, he drank a mouthful of wine. It is the time when youths are unrestrained and unrestrained. How can one not have a female confidant by one's side? If you want to unming qi, there will be a large group of people advancing wave after wave. Female confidant. Xie Jingxing smiled. How would one know that it is not a pink skeleton? Don't make it so scary. Gao Yang pointed to the brothel opposite. Look at how cute the young ladies upstairs are. What skeletons? Boring. Xie Jingxing followed his gaze and suddenly paused. His black eyes flashed with a trace of surprise. Why is it him? Chapter 114. Many young ladies would be sent in to Sanfu Ban every day. Some of these young ladies were still very young and some were already old, but as long as they were sent in, it meant that there was no way out for the rest of their lives, and what awaited them was deep despair and a bleak ending. It was the same today. 2 lively little maids were thrown in, and among the group of haggard and withered females, they were like 2 tender spring onions, giving off a sense of being out of place. From what I see, there is no need to be fixed. The fierce-looking mother looked at the 2 of them critically, good-looking and tender skin. One just do not know how long they can last. Never mind, bring them into the tea room. The 2 little maids were already trembling in fear. These 2 were not others but Yan Mei and Shui Bai, who were ordered by Ren Wanyun to be sold to the 9th-ranked brothel. Yan Mei and Shui Bai had served Shenqing since young and were considered as the most reputable among the maids and had never suffered any hardships before. Now that they had seen the scene of purgatory on earth, they were so scared that their tears would not fall. And that mother's words had shattered their only hope. She said, "Watch them carefully and do not let them seek death." If they could not seek death, then they could only be like those lowly prostitutes and receive customers every day. Thinking of this, Yan Mei and Shui Bai could not help but feel that the world was spinning. Outside of Sanfu Ban, a young male was walking in at this moment. This male's appearance looked rather young and his bearing did not seem like a laborer. The young lady at the door said, "Did this young brother walk the wrong way? This is Sanfu Ban and above are the lofts and pavilions." The implication was that with this young man's identity, he would not come to this place even if he wanted to seek pleasure. This was a place where only the poorest people would come to. What is the meaning of those? The young man lowered his voice. Do you have any new young ladies here? The female at the door was surprised for a moment before understanding in her heart. Most likely this person had never come to such a lowly class before and wanted to find something fresh. This was nothing new. Wealthy families would always have a variety of ways to play and to play in Sanfu Ban. The price was not expensive and anyone could afford to play. She smiled and said, "This little brother has come to the right place. Today, there are 2 new maidservants. They are the maidservants of an official who committed a mistake. They used to follow the young miss of an official's family. They are beautiful, but their price is slightly higher." "Show me," said the man. The woman leading the way brought the young man into the tea room. The reason why Sanfu Ban was the lowest brothel was not because it was a place where laborers came to, but because the young ladies here were very cheap. It only took the effort of a cup of tea. If the girl's culinary skills were better and her tone was gentler, being able to make the customer pay for another plate of pastries was also a skill. But generally speaking, the customers who came here would only order a pot of tea. Firstly, the ladies were not willing to spend the effort. No matter how much money they had, they would not be given a single cent. Secondly, most of the guests were stingy and were not willing to spend an extra copper coin. But today this young man had ordered a pot of tea and a plate of pastries. To San Fu Ban, this was already considered as a very generous customer. The woman leading the way quickly called for the two young maids to be brought in. Yan Mei and Shui Bai were forced to change into thin muslin clothes and came to the tea room full of humiliation. In the autumn, both of them were shivering together. Their clothes could not block the cold and their hearts were very afraid. When the woman leading the way saw that the people were brought in, she said to the young man in a flattering manner, "Little brother, please slowly enjoy the tea. This servant will withdraw first." When she passed by Yan Mei and Shui Bai, she said in a threatening tone, "Serve this sir well." Chapter 115. After the female left, Yan Mei hesitated for a moment and seeing that the young man did not move, she softly said, "This lord." When the words came out, she felt deeply humiliated. In the past when they were in the Shin residence, they were the personal maids of the second household's young lady. Not to mention Kai Yun Yuan, even in the entire Shin residence, the maids would be respectful to both of them. But now they had to be ridden by thousands of people and even be humiliated by a strange male. And all of this was given by Ren Wanyun. It was Ren Wanyun who threw them to this lowly brothel. More than 10 years of master and servant relationship was wiped out in a day and they were worse than enemies. "Do you want to leave this place?" that young man suddenly asked. Yan Mei and Shui Bai were surprised for a moment before recovering to their senses. Shui Bai still had some doubts but Yan Mei excitedly knelt down and said, "If this lord can bring us out, this servant is willing to serve this lord for all eternity and repay this lord." For Yan Mei, staying here was worse than death and it would be better to follow a man. At least it would be better to live in this miserable life where one would never be able to get out. Shui Bai was reminded by Yan Mei's words and also knelt down, begging this lord to save this servant's life. This lord will order these servants to do anything." When the young man heard this, he almost choked on the tea in his mouth and turned his head away uncomfortably. This person was not someone else but the outer courtyard guard of the Shin residence, Mo Qing. Today he came to San Fu Ban under Shin Miao's orders. Even though he did not understand how an unmarried young female like Shin Miao would have such understanding of the brothels in the capital, but today he still had an important matter and even though it was somewhat awkward, he still did as she said. "I can buy your slave contracts and you do not need to follow me and be free," he said. When Yan Mei and Shui Bai heard it, they stared at Mo Qing in disbelief. They did not understand how there would be such a person as the males that came here were naturally looking for pleasure. The young man in front of them did not look like he was a coolie. Yan Mei was naturally more alert as she asked, "What does this lord want these two servants to do?" "Simple." Mo Qing said, "One heard that both of you were the personal maids of the young lady of the general residence's second household. How did you end up in such a situation?" Shui Bai bit her lips and said hatefully, "Because we committed a mistake and were expelled from the Shin residence, but the two of us did not commit any mistake and are only slaves and maids. Whatever master says, we will do." Up until now, Shui Bai had not revealed the key to the matter. It could be assumed that she still had some affection for the second branch. Mo Qing said, "Then you all are hateful?" The two of them were silent. Hate. Naturally, he hated them. It would have been fine if he had given them a cup of poisoned wine to end everything. However, he had to use such a method to make them live a life worse than death, existing in this world like a walking corpse. But what did they do wrong? No one knew what had happened that night. Shin Qing's inexplicable disappearance was the fault of these servants. Although he was heartbroken that something had happened to his young mistress, only a saint would be able to push all the blame onto the two of them. Thinking about it, you also hate. Yan Mei, I heard that you have a younger sister who is a second-rank maid in the Shen family's second household's courtyard. Shui Bai, you have a lot of face in the Shen residence and there are many sisters around. Yan Mei and Shui Bai were startled in their hearts. This person had actually told them everything about their origins. Yes, when Yan Mei and Shui Bai were brought into the Shen residence, they initially said that they were orphans, but that was deliberately concealed in order to select them. Yan Mei's biological younger sister was a second-rank maid in Ren Wanyun's courtyard. Because Shui Bai had a lively temperament, there were many good sisters in Kai Yun Yuan. There is no free trade in this world. I will bring you all away and you all think of a way to tell me about the second household of the Shen residence.